welcome everyone to the bill hearings of the Environment and Transportation Committee this afternoon. I'm sitting in for our chair, Kumar Barve, who has a few meetings this afternoon, but he should be back later in the bill hearings. And I'll announce the bill order. We'll be starting with House Bill 10, Delegate Corman, then House Bill 64, Delegates Krim and Corman, then two bills from Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, House Bill 46 and House Bill 94, then House Bill 59 from Delegate Carr, then two bills from Delegate Healy, House Bill 63 and House Bill 105, then House Bill 77 from Delegate Jam, and House Bill 102 from Delegate Lehman. So with that, Delegate Corman, you'll have 4 minutes, and also want to welcome our colleagues from Appropriations, Delegates Krim and Metzger, in addition, of course, to the bill sponsor, who's also with Appropriations. So Delegate Corman, why don't you take things away?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see everybody. I'm here to present HB 10, the Zero Emission Bus Transition Act revisions. As you all recall, last year you did the tough thing. You made the decision passing through your committee legislation to transition the Maryland Transit Administration's about 800 bus fleet over time to zero emissions. And a particular shout out, of course, to the chair and vice chair, and also subcommittee chair Frazier Hidalgo for their efforts on that bill. It was part of the sort of the overall Climate Solutions Now Act debate, but as you all know, we passed a number of individual pieces from that package, and this was one of those that is now law. Because of some of the back and forth around the broader bill, there were some provisions that we wanted to add to the standalone bill that just didn't get in there to ensure that we could take care of the workers. Some folks might recognize these as sort of just transition provisions to make sure that the existing MTA workforce is not adversely affected by the transition to zero emission bus fleet. I do want to credit the Maryland Transit Administration. They announced sort of the beginnings of their plan last month about transitioning some of their infrastructure. The Consolidated Transportation Program budget that came out yesterday has some bus purchases for a pilot. They have a contract with the Board of Public Works to be part of a Washington State sort of cooperative to purchase buses and do some other things. So they're really moving forward. We want to make sure the workforce isn't left behind. So the bill does a few things. It requires that MTA provide training for its maintenance crews to learn how to operate on zero emission buses and the accompanying charging infrastructure. It establishes registered apprenticeships and other labor management training programs for transitioning workers. It ensures that no current duties of state employees are transferred to contractors in relation to the zero emission bus transition, something MTA, I'll note, has committed to, and requires any entity that operates or maintains a zero emission bus on behalf of MTA to extend the same levels of protection for workers that MTA is required to. I think the sticky issue, I suppose, based on the fiscal note and MTA's informational testimony, and I'll thank MTA again because they provided some informal comments to me ahead of time, is this issue of a registered apprenticeship program. And I think some of the folks in the labor community have some ideas about how we might be able to mitigate some of that cost that MTA is worried about and were highlighted in the fiscal note. I view this as a pretty narrow bill that just sort of finishes the job you all started last year to not only transition the bus fleet, but also the bus fleet workers for this new horizon we are entering into. So with that, Mr. Chair, I look forward to the other testimony and any questions from your colleagues.
Great, thank you very much, Delegate Corman. Something I neglected to mention at the beginning was for sponsors who have 4 minutes, the 2-minute timer will run through twice. So don't want sponsors to think that, when they see the timer running out, that the 4 minutes went by exceedingly fast.
Well, let me give you a few more thoughts then. Just kidding.
All right, thank you. Let's go next to witnesses in support. Brian Weibel.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. HU Local 689 strongly supports HB 10 and urges the House Environment and Transportation Committee to issue a favorable report. We have a once-in-a-generation moment to provide a bona fide just transition and train America's diesel bus maintenance workforce on zero emissions vehicles. Public transit workers understand our responsibility as leaders in the fight against climate change. America needs zero emissions vehicles for its public transportation fleet and fast. But if we fail to consider all of the implications of a rapid transition, we could accidentally hurt the very people who have been most negatively impacted by diesel bus fumes. Since the widespread adoption of diesel buses over a half-century ago, most transit systems have structured their entire workforces around the technology. WMATA alone has nearly 1,000 workers in their bus maintenance department. These workers are well-trained over years and highly skilled with diesel engines. Some have spent their entire lives working on diesel buses. In the rush to transition America's bus fleets to the technologies of the future, we need to answer an important question. What happens to existing diesel bus maintenance workers? We think the fair and just answer is obvious. Every existing diesel bus maintenance worker should be retrained on how to repair new buses, whether they're battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell. But this may be more complicated than it would first seem at first glance. Many zero emissions vehicles manufacturers hope to restructure the entire labor market for bus maintenance. Instead of just buying a bus from the manufacturer and then having your own in-house maintenance workers take care of it, many vendors offer 10 to 12-year warranties that require almost all maintenance to be conducted by the manufacturer. Some companies won't even provide diagnostic codes, and others refuse to offer training to transit authorities. We believe HB 10 could solve many of the problems that MTA could face in their fleet transition and serve as a model path for other transit authorities in this region. Not only is this a just transition, helping to ensure that these workers keep their jobs with new skills, but its support for labor management apprenticeships could make bus maintenance an attractive unionized green career path for young workers without a four-year college degree.
Great, thank you. Okay, next is Daryl Carrington, and also we'll go through all the witnesses who are favorable, and then we'll take questions for the sponsor and the witnesses. So Daryl.
Yes, good morning. Daryl Carrington here on behalf of Carrington & Associates, LLC. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be before you. I think this is a great bill. We know that we need to convert over. We represent several environmental groups and those that are interested in our environment and climate change, and I will not take up a lot of your time. I think this is a great bill. We thank the sponsor for putting it in, and we ask for a favorable report.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Lindsay Mendelson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Mendelson, and I'm the transportation representative with the Maryland Sierra Club. The Maryland Sierra Club has over 70,000 members and supporters across the state, and I urge a favorable report on HB 10. We strongly supported the Zero Emission Bus Transition Act that was enacted last year, and thank Delegate Corman and Senator Zucker for their sponsorship of this bill, as well as the committee for supporting that transition last year as well. We believe that this bill helps to strengthen the zero emission bus transition process by helping to ensure that there's good training and apprenticeship opportunities for employees, as we know that the maintenance and operation of zero emission buses will look differently than for diesel buses. We also think it's important that no duties or function of state employees would be transferred to contracting firms as a part of this process. So the workforce training and employee protections are really needed to ensure a smooth and safe conversion to zero emission buses and ensure that no worker is adversely affected during this transition. We overall strongly believe that policies that address climate change and transition away from fossil fuels must provide a smooth transition that provides for workers and also creates and maintain high quality green jobs. The Sierra Club is one of the co-founders, along with the United Steelworkers, of the Blue Green Alliance, which has grown to 15 unions and environmental organizations representing 16 million people. So we really believe that the best climate solutions are also good economic solutions and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Next, Andrew Frazier.
He has not joined the meeting yet. You could skip over him and maybe we'll go back.
Okay. Elizabeth Bunn.
Thank you, Vice Chair Barve and committee members. My name is Elizabeth Bunn, and I am the Maryland State Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. LNS seeks to build a labor climate movement to secure an ecologically sustainable future that is also economically just. We strongly support HB 10 and urge a favorable report. We also submitted written testimony, so I will be brief here today. Last year, Maryland joined other state climate leaders in requiring the conversion of the state passenger bus fleet towards zero emissions. HB 10 provides an opportunity for the state to elevate its leadership role even further by requiring that the electrification conversion plan protect workers. It would safeguard MTA employees' jobs and their wages and benefits from potential adverse consequences. This is not only the right thing to do, but it also prevents the anxiety and consternation that too often accompany modernization efforts, even climate-safe ones. This stymies the success of those, the anxiety and consternation stymies the success of those plans. But as importantly, it requires the state to train bus operator and maintenance employees on the new technology, including through joint labor management and apprenticeship programs. Workers should be partners at all steps of the transition process. Workers know better than anyone how to safely maintain and operate vehicles. They will understand the problems and they will work to correct them. Kudos to the sponsors of this bill for recognizing this. Workers, riders, and the community will benefit from a successful conversion to an all-electric bus fleet. The bill's provisions will help to ensure that success. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kevin Carpenter.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Kevin Carpenter from the ATU Local 1300. I am acting assistant business agent of the union. I'm also, as of today, a 36-year A repairman. On behalf of ATU Local 1300, we do support House Bill 10, and the ATU Local 1300, representing more than 2,600 transit workers at the MTA, strongly supports the bill, which requires MTA to provide safety and workforce development training for its workforce as the agency transitions to zero-emission bus fleet. The ATU supports the legislature efforts to put clean buses on the road. The major issue the ATU members regarding zero emissions buses is training. Virtually none of our maintenance members are adequately trained to work on zero emission buses. It's really scary and it's not safe. We don't want any member getting electrocuted, and the risk of serious fires are much higher now on the battery operated buses now than ever before. Preventive maintenance on transit buses nowadays are quite different than just a few years ago, when a skilled mechanic could likely have made do with the content of his toolbox. Advances in computer technology has changed the job, yet training has not kept pace and huge skill gaps have developed. It is critical to ensure that resources are set aside for labor management apprenticeship training to ensure that workers get the skills they need to safely operate and maintain these vehicles. By working together, we can provide training to workers so that they can move up the career ladder while saving management money that they can put in to improve and to expand the services. It is a win-win for everyone. I also would like to inform you that on page 4 of the physical note, the information is incorrect. MTA does not need to spend $400,000 on a consultant to make this work.
If you could wrap up, if you don't mind.
We now have a brand new facility in Silver Spring, Maryland, where we can make this happen at a lesser cost. So we urgently ask the committee to support House Bill 10. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Is Andrew Frazier here? No? Okay. Those are all the witnesses in support. So does the committee have any questions? Delegate, let's see, we do have a couple questions. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chair. I'm reading the fiscal note about the electrification, and I know we talked about creating an apprenticeship program. Is there oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Certainly unions that are specific to electricians qualified to be partnered with to do some of this work or to do some of this training? Has there been a thought about that?
Delegate,
Yeah,
I'm not sure who you're asking.
whoever can answer.
Sure. Well, if I could start and then I'll hand it over to ATU because I know they have a lot more detail than I do. But IBEW, I think, is the union you're probably thinking of. It's a good idea. But there is a new facility. You'll see it in sort of ATU's testimony at the labor campus off Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring that's doing these programs. So I think we should start by looking to what they're already doing there before we try to reinvent the wheel.
That's kind of what I was alluding to. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm back. Thanks, Mr. Vice Chairman. It looks like Delegate Wells has a question.
Great. Thank you. Welcome back, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the bill sponsor and the folks who just testified. So I kind of following in the train of line of Delegate Boyce's question, I did have a question a little bit more about how the apprenticeship will work. This question is more so like the mechanics of it. I do understand how apprenticeships work. I spend a lot of time doing that when I'm not here in Annapolis or virtually in Annapolis, but I'm just wondering, it looks like, if you can maybe explain, because it looks like positions, it says 2.0. And so I'm wondering how many actual workers would be impacted by this, and how many would need to go into the apprenticeship and get the upskills training to transition to the electric vehicles.
Thank you, Delegate, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I know where the 2.0 is, but I think it's going to scale up over time. I mean, I think right now they're bringing 3 new electric buses. That's what they're currently in the process of purchasing. But over time, all 800 municipal buses are going to be zero emission technology. So it's going to scale up over time. So I think to start, it's a relatively small number, but it's going to continue to scale up over the next really 10 years as they're replacing a larger scale amount of buses. And I would actually defer to you if there's more detailed language we should be putting in. This is certainly an area of expertise for you that I would welcome your insight, or I guess I shouldn't speak on behalf of the committee because it's your bill now, but you obviously have the expertise in this area.
And the 2.0 comes from page 4 of the fiscal note.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the bill.
Okay, got you. Yeah. So I was just curious. It's under the workforce training and apprenticeship. So I was wondering, but I think also just, I guess this is one of those Jeopardy questions that our chairman always urges us to ask if we want to make a statement. But
It has to be in the form of a question. That's right.
Yeah. So the reason why you would want to train existing ATU mechanics is because unlike electrical workers from IBEW, your workers are actual mechanics. Isn't that so? Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you. So it's not the same type of work that although it is electrical in nature, it is not the same type of scope of work that a traditional electrician would be utilizing.
That is also correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well done. Delegate Amprey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for the sponsor and Mr. Carpenter. Just wanted to get more insight on the, I think Mr. Carpenter had said that the cost would be offset from the 400,000 that was originally stated in the fiscal note. I just wanted to get an idea of how much of an offset would it be, given I believe you said there's a training facility in somewhere in the state where we could offset some of that cost. Just wanted to get an idea of that. Are you saying that it would completely offset that cost, or would partially offset that cost, just to get an idea on the cost that we're possibly saving?
So, Delegate, before I hand it over to ATU, I just want to note that if you look at MTA's informational testimony, they talk about that they couldn't find an existing program. And that was part of the reason they thought it was going to cost so much. But there is an existing program, and let me turn it over to Mr. Carpenter, Mr. Weibel to talk about that.
Sure. So the first thing I'd highlight is some of the cost offsets, not only just because there are existing programs for this, but I'd like to also point people to the federal bipartisan infrastructure bill, which actually had money allocated in there for the use of labor management apprenticeship programs for fleet transition specifically. So I wanted to highlight that. As far as the existing program, it's a partnership between the International Transportation Learning Center and Amalgamated Transit Union. Several other locals across the country have had existing diesel bus maintenance apprenticeship programs for years, and that's been how agencies hired people in as diesel bus maintenance apprenticeship programs. But the International Transportation Learning Center, after receiving a grant for the from the Federal Transit Administration, has been developing an electric bus maintenance apprenticeship program that would likely be what the MTA would be able to partner with Local 1300 on.
Thank you.
That answers, okay. Any other questions for the sponsor or any of the witnesses? Well, seeing none, okay, so seeing none, that's going to be the end of House Bill 10. Let's proceed now to House Bill 64, Delegates Krim and Corman. Is Delegate Krim with it? Yeah, there she is. Delegate Krim, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You have 4 minutes and two and two.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's good to see members of this committee. Haven't seen you for a few months and nice to reconnect. So I'm here to present to you House Bill 64, State Highways, Designated Shoulder Areas, Establishment of Use by Transit Buses. So this is a program that I've been involved with for probably 12 years. Before I was a delegate, I chaired a task force at the Transportation Planning Board on this topic. And what we discovered was that 14 other states already use this program for transit buses. So what this means is that if you get on a bus in Frederick at the Park and Ride, a commuter bus, and we do have a lot of people pre-pandemic, not so much now, but a lot of people who rode commuter bus from Frederick to the Shady Grove Metro Station. So many times, though, there would be issues regarding reliability of like a schedule, a time that you could depend on being there. And why? Because of traffic congestion during the peak times. So what a transit bus would do under this program is be able to use the shoulder area to bypass the traffic congestion and then go on its way. And it makes the trip much more reliable. Of course, it's probably a better use on the way home because many times people have to pick up their children from daycare or they have to be home at a certain time. They may have to go to a second job. So being able to get back to their cars at the Park and Ride to go off to do the rest of their day is important to have that time that you can depend on. And this makes that transit trip reliable. So as I said, 14 other states use the program successfully. If any of you have traveled in Europe, you'll see that it's used there quite frequently. And how this is accomplished is that it may require the state to increase the pavement where the bus will use the shoulder area. Sometimes that shoulder area is not equipped to handle buses on a regular basis. But that's a relatively lower cost than, of course, putting in an extra lane for buses. So this uses our existing infrastructure for transportation. And we're also now looking to increase transit use. Since the pandemic, we have seen a significant drop-off in our use of transit. This is a way to market that commuter bus, to get people back on the bus, taking them to the metro station in Shady Grove from Frederick. Now, in other parts of the state, they could probably, use this program in Southern Maryland, Charles County. I know I've heard from my colleagues in that area that they also have tremendous traffic congestion. So this is a relatively affordable way to make commuter bus more attractive. And if you look in other states on how they do it safely, there's a lot of signage involved. The signs are already done, so all Maryland would have to do would just be ordered the same kinds of signs. So, and I just want to point out, Mr. Chairman, if you see my letter from MDOT, it says letter of support. Now, I just want to point out that how many times have you seen a letter of support from MDOT for a program? Now, I see Delegate Wells up there is getting some enjoyment out of that statement. So I will leave that with you.
I was going to say it's rare to see the administration opine in any way. So in any case, it looks like Delegate Weigel has a question.
Good.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually looking at MDOT letter, but the first sentence says they take no position on the bill. But in the last paragraph, I wonder if you could respond to that. It says MDOT SHA currently has the authority to manage traffic patterns of shoulder areas on state highways and design certain roadways to have shoulders large enough for bus usage. Could you respond as to whether or not they already have the authority that you're looking to grant them under this?
I think they have the authority. What this bill does is raise the awareness of this program. Like I said, I've been trying to move this program along for 10 years. And there doesn't seem to be enthusiasm from the department. In fact, prior to my filing the bill, I did talk to a couple members of this committee, and I mentioned the name of the program, and they said, well, what is that? So it's raising awareness so that so people can see that there is a program out there. There is a program that will enhance commuter bus. And I might point out to you, Delegate Weibel, I can see where people coming from the Hagerstown area may want to use the commuter bus. Do you have commuter bus? I think you do, don't you?
We do too, yeah, a Sharpsburg Pike, yes.
Yes. So maybe coming down through the Frederick area to jump over onto the shoulder area to bypass congestion. And you know, we do have that in Frederick County.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. I was just questioning whether or not they already have the authority, because the fiscal note even says it authorizes them to establish the area. So I was just confused as to whether the bill established the authority or whether it was enhancing it, as you said. So
and you know, I did notice the first sentence where it says no position.
Yeah.
I chose to enhance to you the letter of support because I just thought it was just too special to pass up.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Foley has a question.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear and thank you to the sponsors for bringing this bill. I think this is a really common sense way to encourage, as you said, public use of public transportation and to encourage use of commuter buses. I just want to be clear, though, this contemplates, this is not contemplating using this kind of use of shoulder area on interstates or 4-lane highways. This would primarily be roads that are, because I think the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. So we're talking about lesser roads or secondary roads. Is that correct?
No, and welcome to you, Delegate Foley. I don't think we've had the opportunity to be introduced, but no, this is for on state highways, for interstate highways. This is used in other areas around the country on places where there's heavy traffic congestion, peak times of day. And that's what I'm really referring to here when I'm using it for my own community in Frederick. You know, it would take people on Interstate 270 from the Shady Grove Metro back to Frederick. And there are places where there are choke points on I-270. I mean, we all know where they are. It's where the lanes compress from 3 to 2. you put the commuter bus on there. It does allow people to get back and forth in a relatively safe and efficient manner. And that's what we're looking for here. We're looking to keep people safe. And oops, my light went off in my office. To keep people safe and also to give them a reliable trip on the commuter bus so that more people use it. That's what we're looking for. And you have the bill before me talked about electric buses. Pretty soon we're going to have all electric buses, like Delegate Corman said. So you have people taking electric buses. Yeah, you have zero emissions. All these people are off the road. They're not causing more congestion. They're not spewing emissions. They're on an electric bus going to other transit.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up because I
Sure.
made a wrong assumption. So are there, can you just address then, Delegate Krim, can you just address the safety concerns of people who have to pull off the road onto the shoulder and what provisions will be made for that?
Well, how they do it in other states is they do have patrols so that if there is perhaps somebody who has pulled off onto a designated area that a bus may use, first of all, the bus would use it if they could see that there was somebody there. And then they would radio to the bus drivers not to use that designated area. You're not talking about a bus driver using a shoulder area for a very long distance. We're talking about to get around congestion, which is not, I'm not talking miles, I'm talking probably hundreds of feet.
Thank you very much. Now I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Before I recognize Delegate Terraza, Delegate Krim, so the buses won't exclusively use the shoulders. They'll just use the shoulders to get around traffic.
Right. And there yes. And
well, okay, but all right. So let me just ask this question then. Let's say there's a 10-mile stretch of road, a 5-mile stretch of road between Gaithersburg and Frederick that is congested. Would they be able to drive that full 5 miles on the shoulder?
So if the bill, as it's stated, is that the state police and the transit administration would designate the area. So I don't think the state police will allow for that long an area of shoulder use. So we would, and then of course there is signage. Delegate.
I guess I'm not fundamentally understanding how this is. So a bus driver doesn't, under your bill, the bus driver wouldn't have the ability to pull into the shoulder anytime they felt they wanted to.
Right, exactly.
So I don't have the bill in front of me right now, but I mean, is it your intention to say that the state police will designate zones that will have signage saying buses can drive on the shoulder here? Is that what you're intending to do?
Yes, and see, the signage is also for the motoring public, so they know that there could be a bus there and not to get alarmed. Yes.
Okay, I think Delegate Ruth has a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just sort of following up on this discussion. So in terms of the question of safety, if I understand right, there are speed limitations also. I think it says the bus can't travel more than 10 miles faster than the traffic roadway, and that it can't drive on the shoulder if the traffic itself is more than 35 miles an hour or greater. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
And these are rules of the road that have worked in other states. This is not like on a pilot program in these other states. This is regular use of shoulder areas in these other states, and that has been done successfully.
Okay, Delegate Terraza has a question.
For the most part, Delegate Foley and Chairman Barvey asked my questions, but I'm a little confused about another aspect. is the signage permanent signage, or the signage is temporary signage when there's a, right, when there's a traffic jam?
I would say it's permanent signage. I mean, and it would probably give times, like between the hours, like what you see for the use of HOV lanes. You see those signs, like between the hours of, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. This is a designated use of a bus on shoulders. That's the way I see the signs.
Okay, and then how would the patrolling work then?
Well, are you talking about to see if there's a disabled vehicle?
Yeah, that's mostly my concern, because otherwise I think it's a good idea. It makes sense to move transit around traffic. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just worried about.
Well, we do have police officers that do patrol the highway, and there would be a way for the police to communicate with the bus drivers. But I think the drivers could see when there's a disabled vehicle, but they could be made aware of when there are disabled vehicles on the side of the road.
Would they have to communicate to the police that they were using the side of the road?
The police would be involved in the decision on what shoulder areas would be appropriate for.
But not at that moment.
No, not at that moment. No.
Yeah,
no.
I'm a little. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any further questions for the sponsor? It appears that she's the only person signed up to actually testify. Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Delegate Krim. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 64. We'll proceed to House Bill 46. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the esteemed Environment and Transportation Committee. So happy to be here. I am introducing House Bill 46, Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program, not subject to a fee. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of this because the next two bills have some similar subject matter. Greenhouse gas emissions have lasting and often deadly consequences to our population and our health. According to the Maryland Department of Health, in 2018, there were 29,534 asthma-related emergency visits in Maryland. That cost the state over $27.7 billion, basically a year to deal with. As all of you or most of you know, if you drive an internal combustion car, a car that burns gasoline, we have an emissions testing program, and that emissions testing program means every 2 years you have to get your car tested. It's $14. You pay $14. You go. They plug in the ODM sensor with the computer from the emission station, and they spit out a report to say if you're as clean as you can be, your catalytic converter and everything's working properly, or you don't. If you don't, you have to mitigate it. You have to try to find a way to make your car burn as clean as possible so that you can pass the test. If you do pass, and most people pass, you just go on your way and you're good for another 2 years. Unfortunately, what is happening is any car that was built before 1996 doesn't have that sensor, so we don't test them. So they drive around the state of Maryland and they never get tested. Not only do they not have to pass the test, they don't pay anything. They don't show up for a test. They don't have to pass a test, and they don't pay $14 to help mitigate the environmental cost to the state for polluting vehicles. All this bill does is say to the majority of those vehicles, of which there are over 570,000 vehicles in the state of Maryland that aren't subject to any emissions testing whatsoever. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason is because in most cases the car or truck is too old, so it would never pass, so we don't test them. And the other part, like I said, is because they don't have that computer interface. So essentially what this does is it says for those vehicles, they don't have to pass the test. They don't actually even have to show up for the test. But what they do is have to pay the $14 every 2 years, just like everybody else does. So if you have an older vehicle, there are some exceptions. I have a couple of amendments that makes sure that historic vehicles are in the bill, and that ambulances and fire rescue vehicles and the elderly as well as military personnel aren't subject to it. But those $14 then go to the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, SEIF, where we fund a lot of our environmental and climate change policy, where it's funded, and that money is earmarked specifically for electric vehicles moving forward to help create incentives to promote electric vehicles moving forward. So it's really a pretty simple bill. All it does is say for those folks who have an older vehicle and aren't subject to the test, they don't have to pass the test. You just have to pay the $14, which I don't think is a really huge lift. But with that said, I am happy to take questions.
Okay, we have a couple of people signed up in favor. Let's get through all of them and then we'll entertain questions. The first person is Andrew Frazier. Andrew Frazier?
They were missing from an earlier bill as well. I don't believe they're here today.
Okay, what about Ramon Palencia Calvo?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, Ramon Palencia Calvo, Deputy Director of Maryland Legal Conservation Borders. Thank you for this opportunity to testify in support of HB 46 and the leadership of Delegate Frazier Hidalgo on this important issue. Maryland LCB works at the intersection of addressing climate change and environmental justice, and this bill addresses both. This is a bill that will help the climate and public health. Pollution from carbon emissions not only fuels climate change, but also has a devastating effect on our health, especially the health of our underserved and most vulnerable communities, which have for too long been disproportionately impacted by pollution in Maryland. In order to confront the growing threat of climate change and improve community health, the state must continue to take bold steps to address the pollution from the transportation sector, which is the largest contributor to our carbon emissions. Maryland currently has a goal of 300,000 zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2025, and we're still falling very short of this goal. And we need to accelerate the deployment of electric vehicles, using BIP revenues collected from this fee to fund electric vehicle programs, including electric school buses, will help clean our air, fight climate change, and promote equitable outcomes in Maryland. Maryland LCB strongly supports this supports the provision on this bill that designates funds from this program for the purchasing of electric school buses. And we also encourage the sponsor to consider making clarifications to the bill, which would ensure that the funds collected through this program be distributed equitably using Justice 40 principles. And this would require that at least 40% of funds be directed to communities underserved and overburdened by pollution. Maryland LCB strongly urges a favorable report on this important bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, Christian Robinson.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I want to thank the members of the committee for their time today. My name is Christian Robinson, and I'm testifying on behalf of the Specialty Equipment Market Association, which is better known as SEMA. Today, I wish to express SEMA's support for House Bill 46 if it is amended in a manner that would create an exemption for Class L vehicles, which are historic vehicles, and Class N vehicles, which are street rods. I have submitted these suggested amendments in written testimony. Representing the $48 billion specialty automotive industry, SEMA is a trade association made up of approximately 7,500, mostly small businesses nationwide, including 74 in Maryland, that manufacture, sell, and distribute specialty automotive aftermarket products, including appearance, restoration, performance, comfort, convenience, and technology products for motor vehicles, including electric vehicle conversion kits. Under current Maryland law, a historic vehicle would be those that are at least 20 years old and have not been substantially altered from their original appearance. By law, they're limited in use to exhibition, car club activities like Saturday morning cars and coffee event, parades, tours, and occasional transportation. They're strictly prohibited from being used as daily drivers, such as to and from work or school. Additionally, any historic vehicle that is later than model year 1986 is newer than model year 1986 is subject to equipment repair orders to preventive use of the program. Examples of this would include classic Ford Mustangs, classic Ford pickup trucks, and Chevy Camaros. Street rods are very similar. They're at least 25 years old, but have been substantially altered from their appearance. They are limited to the same usage restrictions as historic vehicles. I think a good example of this would be like a 1930s Ford Hot Rod Coupe, like the one featured in the film American Graffiti. Because these vehicles, historic and street rods, are driven so infrequently, and frankly, to the owners, they're often prized possessions that are infrequently taken out of the garage, certainly not on a type of day that we're experiencing here in Montgomery County today. SEMA does not believe that they should be subject to the fees instituted by HB 46. I thank the committee for their time, and I'd like to thank Delegate Frazier Hidalgo for a productive conversation on this matter and hope that our proposed amendments will be accepted.
Okay, we have a number of questions. First one goes to Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, question, does all vehicles in the state of Maryland have to be inspected every 2 years for emission control?
Well, that's what this bill gets at. No, not all vehicles. All the modern vehicles, the passenger cars, the light duty pickup trucks, those kinds of things, they're all tested every 2 years. But the older vehicles or some of the specialty vehicles are not, and this just attempts to capture some of those.
I think what I'm trying to get to with my question is, all of the newer vehicles, are they inspected in every county? Isn't there some counties that don't have inspection requirements?
So I know there has been talk of some exemption, and I'm not sure on the very latest vehicles, whether the very latest vehicles are, but a majority of the vehicles that are over 3 years old are all tested every 2 years. I know there was a push, and I'm not sure where it is right now at the moment, but for some of the newer vehicles. But again, all the older vehicles that you generally drive, your 2015, 2010, 2005, whatever passenger vehicle gets tested every 2 years.
If we could get something checked on that, I'm not sure that's 100% correct. I may be wrong, but I believe some counties that they don't have admission inspection stations in them, and they don't require even the newer vehicles to be inspected on a every 2 year basis. I know in Calvert County we do. I don't believe in St. Mary's County they do, unless that's just changed recently. So
well, I know
we'll have staff counsel check on that in the subcommittee. Delegate Sarah Love has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, I have two questions for you. My first question is, do you know approximately how many vehicles there are right now who that would be covered by this bill? Basically the ones right now that aren't paying the 14 like others with ICE engines.
So there are 570,000 in the state that do not emissions test at all. Of those, depending on how the final bill passes based on the amendments, it could be anywhere from a couple of 100,000 all the way up to 570,000. It just depends on what level we take the amendments that I proposed and what the subcommittee finally decides. But it's hundreds of thousands of vehicles in the state that aren't emissions tested at all.
Got it. Thank you. And then my second question was teed up perfectly by your answer, which was, could you reiterate the amendments?
Sure. So there are a couple of amendments. Amendment number one was just a drafting error, and it's adds historic vehicles, because in the drafting it just didn't get in. And then amendment number two, there was some folks that did some pushback, and I think some of it was really good to do. But amendment number two removes ambulances, fire and rescue. So ambulances, fire engines, which I think is the correct thing to do. Disabled drivers, served and military service personnel and elderly paying for it. So I think that's something that we have to bring up in subcommittee and decide where we want to go on those specific issues.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Delegate Weigel, then Delegate Terraza, and just to let you know, at 2 o'clock, I'm going to have to leave for the Legislative Policy Committee, and the Vice Chair will take over at that point. So anyway, Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David, would the fee also apply to electric vehicles? When I read the language, it says that those that are granted a waiver under mandatory inspections would pay this fee. I'm assuming that would include electric vehicles?
No, it does not include electric vehicles because electric vehicles don't have any emission. So it does not include electric vehicles.
Correct. So aren't they granted a waiver under?
They should be granted a waiver, yes.
So the way I read it, if the vehicle's granted a waiver, then they would be subject to this fee.
That's probably an error in bill drafting that we need to address. Thank you.
Well, I know we've had discussions in the past about electric vehicles using the roads, not paying gas tax and all that kind of stuff. I was wondering if that was your intent. And
I
then
will say this, Delegate Weibel, that one of the bills that we passed last year went over to the Senate, and there's a study that's coming out. I'm not sure if the study's out yet, but it was going to look at exactly what you were just talking about.
okay. And then secondly, I know I had a bill in the past for vehicles, kind of not just looking at the age, those that I think we exempt, I forget what the age is, 65 or 55, and drive less than a certain number of miles. Would you consider an amendment for vehicles that are driven less than a certain number of miles to exempt them from the inspection, but not the fee?
Well, in this bill, they would be exempted from the inspection anyway. So they're not actually inspected. They just pay the $14.
Only if you're over a certain age. My bill actually removed the age and just said if you drive, I forget what the miles were. It was 2,000, 5,000 miles a year, I think. If you drove less than 5,000 miles a year, regardless of age, you would be exempted. But that bill exempted you from both the inspection and the fee. I was just rethinking that maybe you would be willing to have an amendment to exempt them from the inspection, but not the fee, because that bill had a large fiscal net.
You know, I'm happy to talk with you offline.
Okay.
I mean, I think you know what I'm trying to capture here. Like those vehicles, those older vehicles, a lot of times the drivers, the historic vehicles don't drive them a lot, granted, but they don't have catalytic converters in most cases, and the pollution level that's coming out of the exhaust pipes of those vehicles is demonstratively greater than what a modern vehicle is.
Okay. All right.
But I'm happy to chat with you about it.
All right. Thanks.
Delegate Terrazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very quick clarifying question. You keep saying you're adding historic vehicles. Do you mean adding them as an exemption or adding them so they're included?
Adding them so that they're included, so they pay the $14.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Well, seeing none, I believe that ends the public hearing on House Bill 46. Let's go to House Bill 94. Also, Delegate Frazier Dalgo.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm here to submit to you for approval House Bill 94. This is virtually the same bill that we passed last year. It converts the state fleet of vehicles as the state purchases vehicles to have them purchase electric vehicles. We did pass this bill last year. It did get out of the House on sine die, but unfortunately, it didn't ever get to the Senate. So we got out on sine die, and we still have to get the bill across the line. The bill is essentially the same. I could talk about some of the asthmatic rates. I think there's a really important function that we as a committee and as a society need to really consider, not only greenhouse emissions and climate change as a result of polluting, but really there's a public health aspect to this. All of these vehicles, there's a huge public health aspect that I think that we don't completely understand, or we don't put into our equations as much, which is why I read the $27.7 billion or whatever it was that Marylanders pay for asthmatic related issues. The bill is largely the same as it was last year. The only thing, we added one amendment to the bill, which is on page 3, lines 10, 11, 26, and 27. And it just changes the chief procurement officer to the Department of Budget and Management. And that's simply because they reached out and they had some specific numbers that they keep track of. And it just made more sense for them to report it as opposed to the other. That's about it. It just, like I said, it transitions the vehicles. I'm happy to go into more detail if anybody has any specific questions. It's essentially the same bill as last year.
Okay, we have a number of people who've signed up. I assume Andrew Frazier hasn't shown up, or maybe he has. Nope, apparently not. Okay, well,
He's the slacker.
I'm
I
here.
believe he's here.
I'm here.
Oh, all right. Andrew Frazier, you're up for 2 minutes.
Okay, I don't think I need 2 minutes, but thanks very much, Delegate Barbe, for recognizing me. I think this is a fantastic bill. I'm glad to hear about it, that it passed last year, and I hope it can pass through the Senate this year. I totally agree with Delegate Fraser Hidalgo on the fact that we really don't know all the fumes we're being exposed to. We don't know the kind of danger this is, not only from an environmental perspective, but also from just breathing it in. And if we're going to spend money as a state and tax dollars as a state, I don't think we need to be supporting the petroleum industry because they've shown no effort to really care about the environment, in my opinion. I'll end it with that.
Okay, any questions?
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Delegate Stein has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, thank you so much for bringing back this very important bill. One question, and I can't remember if we discussed this or not, but would you be willing to also say that any new vehicle that's purchased that's not a zero emission vehicle has to be a hybrid vehicle?
At least a hybrid vehicle, you mean?
At least a hybrid vehicle. You know, I mean, we can talk about that, and I'm happy to have that come. I just worry because the electric vehicles are to the point now where we don't need that many hybrid plugins anymore. The hybrid plug-in was kind of a period of time when we were trying to convert from ICE vehicles to fully electric vehicles, and hybrids really made some sense in those days. I don't think that that's really needed today, but I'm happy to chat with you or anybody else if that's a really big sticking point. But I mean, at this point, there are so many full electric vehicles that have ranges of upwards of 300 miles that I don't see the need, but I'm happy to chat about it.
Yeah, just to follow up, Delegate, I'm not saying that in lieu of zero emission vehicles, just to the extent, say, you say, for example, fiscal year 26 and 27, at least 50% of passenger cars have to be zero emission vehicles. So I guess I'm saying to the extent that there are still maybe 50% that are not CEV, not ZEVs that year, that they have to be hybrid. So, well, we can talk more.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay.
We can talk about it. There are dozens of options right now at this point in the EV world. When we first started, when this committee first embarked upon trying to figure out in the General Assembly back in 2007 and 2011, how to transition to sustainable transport, there was the Nissan Leaf, 70, 80 miles. There were a couple of cars here or there. But since that period of time, it's not unusual for you to be able to purchase an EV with a 250, 300, or 350 mile range on them now. I know several members of the committee have them.
Really? Do say. Okay, that looks like that's the end of the public hearing for House Bill 94. I'm going to have to leave for the Legislative Policy Committee. Mr. Vice Chairman, please take over.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next, House Bill 59, Delegate Carr.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and my distinguished colleagues of the Environment and Transportation Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Al Carr. I'm pleased to be the lead sponsor of House Bill 59. This is a bill that's intended to improve democracy in our state by strengthening the disclosure of money spent to influence policy decisions within local governments. It raises the minimum standards for lobbying definitions within county and municipal ethics laws. Under current law, local governments are required to have local ethics ordinances covering conflict of interest, financial disclosure, and lobbying. These provisions must be either similar or substantially similar to state rules. Local governments are given flexibility to customize their ethics ordinances to fit their jurisdictions, and small municipalities can get a full or partial waiver from the State Ethics Commission. When it comes to local lobbying ordinances, there's a disparity in the definition of a lobbyist and the rules for who must register and disclose their lobbying activities and expenditures. Jurisdictions can be divided into two groups based on who is defined as a lobbyist. The first group is the A team, It's comprised of those jurisdictions with a strong definition of lobbying that closely matches the state definition. Lobbying generally means those persons who spend or are paid a certain amount of money to influence government officials and their policy decisions. The second group is the B team. Those jurisdictions have weak definitions of lobbying that differ from the state definition and from common sense. A lobbyist in those places is defined as a person who buys a meal or buys entertainment or buys a gift for a government official. Many of those jurisdictions have zero registered lobbyists, despite having budgets in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars and full planning and zoning authority. This inconsistency is not the fault of our counties and municipalities. The blame lies with the state. We're currently providing weak guidance in the form of the 2 model ethics ordinances in COMAR that local governments are encouraged to adopt. The Model A ordinance contains the strong definition of lobbying, and the Model B ordinance contains the weak one. House Bill 59 will update the model ordinances to raise the bar and make the stronger definition the minimum. In your bill file, you'll notice that the Maryland Municipal League does not oppose the bill. The Maryland Association of Counties did submit a letter of opposition to the bill as introduced. In my testimony, I'm including a sponsor amendment that hopefully lessens the concerns expressed by MACO. It was crafted in consultation with the State Ethics Commission staff, Dia Daly, and Committee Counsel Matt Michler, and it's designed to ensure continued flexibility on the part of local governments and the State Commission while setting clear and stronger minimum standards for local lobbying. Rather than create a mandate, the bill as amended simply improves state guidance without raising costs or creating an administrative burden on counties and municipalities. Passage of this bill will benefit Marylanders, and I ask for your favorable report.
Great, thank you very much, Delegate. Next, I'd like to call up Joanne Antoine.
Yes, good afternoon, Vice Chair Stein and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joanne Antoine, Executive Director of Common Cause Maryland, testifying in support of House Bill 59, which aims to strengthen our local ethics law, specifically the provisions around what activity is considered lobbying and the requirements for registration for the jurisdictions that have chosen to model their ethics codes after option B, or the weaker option, as Delegate Carr put it. I know that I've got limited time, so I don't want to be repetitive, as Delegate Carr has already done a great job of, kind of laying out the overall problem here. I'd say in my conversations with him, I admittedly was surprised to find that there were so many, especially the larger counties and municipalities, that had opted for option B, and how very few people have actually been required to register just in recent years, when we know that that's not the case. And I'll use Common Cause as an example. This would mean that even us as an organization that works at the local level, where many times we're spending a significant amount of staff time and funding on digital tools to advocate, that we aren't actually required to register in many of these places, especially since we don't engage in activity like buying food and gifts and so forth, and may not, always appear before that public body or officials. It's concerning because this means that we don't have a full picture, or in most cases, any idea who and what entities, are spending money and a significant amount of time to influence our local government. I think House Bill 59 presents some sensible changes here that makes clear to all, what we would consider to be lobbying, without making it an overly burdensome process, especially for our partners and grassroots organizations that may be doing work in those communities. And I know that there's some concern from counties around the administrative work here that might be needed, but I think when we're looking at jurisdictions like Montgomery County, for example, where one branch of government is modeled after option A, and another after option B, I think it's just some small process changes, and even if there's more administrative work that's needed, I think it's critical,
If I could ask you to wrap up, please. Okay.
Yes, so again, we urge a favorable report. I think this is a very simple, non-controversial bill, but it also ensures that we know who is influencing decision makers at the local level. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Amanda Farber.
Ms. Farber is unable to make it, but she did send in written testimony.
Okay, all right, very good. So at this point, let's go to questions. Do you have a question from Delegate Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Carr, would that also include school boards in the counties also?
Thank you, Delegate. That's a great question. The answer is no. This bill only concerns counties and municipalities. It does not affect school boards.
Is there a reason why we would not want to include school boards? Because then lots of times 50% of the revenues that the counties are spending is on school systems. And wouldn't you say that it seems like it would be logical to include school boards also?
Thank you, Delegate, for that question. Yeah, I have not studied whether this problem exists for school boards. I know they're under a different section of state law that dictates their ethics laws. So I focused on counties and municipal government where I know this is an issue, but I can't really speak to whether this is a problem for school boards.
Okay, thank you. We'll talk about it in subcommittee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the sponsor or witnesses in favor? All right, well, seeing none, let's go to the unfavorable witness, DePaul Nyberg. Is Mr. Nyberg here?
He is in the meeting.
He's
okay,
on camera there. Oh.
Mr. Nyberg, or maybe I'm mispronouncing his last name, Nibber, Nibber?
He was here before.
He's here. He's there.
I see him.
There he is.
I have to apologize. My connection is a little unstable here, but hopefully I'm able to get my words out. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is DePaul Nibber, and I'm here representing the Maryland Association of Counties in opposition to HB 59. As mentioned by the bill sponsor, counties are already obligated to create ethics laws substantially similar to the state's model provisions. It should be noted that within COMAR, Appendix A and Appendix B, which were discussed earlier, are intended for differently sized counties and municipalities, with the former intended for larger entities. And I think you'll see that reflected amongst who has adopted Appendix A and who has adopted Appendix B. This differentiation exists because in carrying out their everyday activities, county officials encounter a number of different community members in a number of different venues. To date, we've not heard of widespread ethical lapses. In fact, the minimal standard under the more permissive Appendix B is very encompassing. Its provisions apply to those personally appearing before a county official or employee with the intent to influence that person in performance of the official duties of the official or employee. It is very similar to existing state law. To this end, HB 59 is potentially duplicative to the extent that the state's lobbying laws reflect the model provisions. Additionally, it will create administrative issues, which we've heard from a number of our county members regarding, and trying to mesh state law with existing local laws can be a cumbersome endeavor. Under this bill, as drafted, a great deal of discretion counties have over lobbying activities will be removed with potentially unintended consequences. As drafted, there is the potential for community associations to be required to register as lobbyists for everyday activities such as publishing newsletters. The same applies for PTAs and other grassroots organizations. That said, the bill sponsor, Delegate Carr, very kindly shared a copy of his proposed amendment with MACO.
If you could please wrap up.
I'm sorry?
If you could please wrap up.
Yes, absolutely. So we did receive the amendment from Delegate Carr. Our county staff are currently reviewing the language, but at least one jurisdiction believes the amendment doesn't resolve the potential for unintended consequences. Regardless, as drafted, we believe HB 59 will pose an administrative burden. And
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, any questions? Yes, we do have a few questions. Delegate Siliberti. Barry?
Delegate Siliberti, you are muted at the moment.
Now, okay. We've had a number of bills that deal with ethics and registration of lobbyists. Is there such a track record of abuse out there that that would require this bill? Or respectfully, is this a bill in search of a problem? Period.
Mr. Nyberg, I don't know if you want to answer that or if the sponsor, Delegate Carr, if you want to respond.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond. Of course, I support the bill. But yeah, I think really in our democracy, it depends on people being able to know what money, what resources, and who are trying to influence not just our elections, but our governing, our policies, our decisions. And that's why do we regulate lobbyists? That's the whole point of why we regulate lobbyists, is for that very reason. And when you have, these large jurisdictions with a, $50 million annual budget or $100 million annual budget, and they have zero registered lobbyists, and, to a common person, there are people who are paying or are paid large sums of money to influence those governments. It's a bit of a sham to, have a system where, you're defining only a lobbyist is only someone who takes you to a concert or buys you a beer. We know that that's not lobbying to a layperson. And so we just need to make our, raise the bar and make the definition of lobbying fit the common sense definition.
But back to my point, is there any track record of abuse out there that requires this bill? Given all that we do have with respect to ethics bills and regulations of lobbyists?
Well, I guess I'm not one who says you wait for some, enormous earth-shattering scandal before you, make the law work better. I think that we are better off when we have, disclosure and we have the public being able to know, who is influencing our local governments and how much they're spending.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question for the sponsor, and then maybe one question for Mr. Nyberg, who I think had his hand up. So, Mr. Nyberg, you're welcome to use my question to talk about the previous one, I guess, if the chair allows. But my question for the sponsor is, wouldn't it be sort of hard to know if there is a problem that we're seeking to solve if there's not currently registration required? I'm thinking, how would we even know if there is improper influence peddling going on if there's such a huge gaping loophole in many local counties' ethics laws? How would we even know?
Yeah, Delegate, that's a great question. And we wouldn't know because the definition is so weak. You would have, zero or a small number of lobbyists registering. That's exactly what we see. So we would have no way of even knowing whether there are any issues or what resources are being brought to bear to influence these government policy decisions.
Great, I appreciate that. And then one question as promised for Mr. Nyberg, and then I'll shut up, which is, I know you spoke a lot about sort of the administrative burden, especially on the smaller counties, and I dutifully, to your point, pulled up the list that the sponsor helpfully provided of the counties, which ones have A and which ones have B. And I think it is fair to say there is at least somewhat of a relationship. between the size of the county and whether they've adopted it, though obviously there are also outliers. For example, Caroline County, the second smallest county in the state, has adopted Model A, whereas Harford County, which is one of the largest, most populated counties, has adopted Model B. But I guess I'm just trying to drill down exactly what you mean by administrative burden. Like, what is exactly, walk me through, if the state put out and said, Model A is now the floor, walk me through the process that Harford County would have to go through to comply and why it would be so onerous on them.
So you'll have to forgive me because I've only heard this secondhand from our county folks, but the way I understand it is that, our ethics reporting is entirely voluntary. So to your previous question about, how would we know that there's an issue? Well, I would argue that, the issue isn't necessarily with the definitions, but whether or not folks engaged in lobbying recognize that they're engaged in lobbying and whether or not they're registering appropriately. But by creating a more encompassing definition, the burden shifts a bit more towards the counties to find who these actors are and then, go after them when we already know that they don't have the resources to do something along those lines. I mean, many county folks wear multiple different hats.
My understanding, and I would probably have to talk to Dia Daly about it, but my understanding is the State Ethics Commission also has enforcement ability over local officials for ethics violations. So I'm not exactly sure why it would be an administrative burden. It seems like what you're saying is it's not so much an administrative burden to change the laws over. That's just kind of like passing a new law and requiring different types of folks to register. What you seem to be saying actually is that a lot of more people will be in non-compliance, or maybe they won't know the law has been updated, and then the county will have to proactively go after them to make sure they're in compliance, or maybe even to penalize them for non-compliance. Isn't that function already taken care of by the State Ethics Commission?
I think there's two entities that are kind of involved here. One is the state, and then on the local level, there are local entities that look over at local ethics laws. So the state could certainly get involved, but there is a local element at play here. Regarding the other element to your question, I think that, the administrative burden could also, and again, I'm paraphrasing here from county officials that I've heard from, there are laws that have been on the books for years, and revising them to reflect what was passed by the state later on could potentially be an issue.
Right. Okay. And I guess I'm just thinking that obviously if a bunch of counties that are similarly sized to Harford, and then even a county as small as Caroline has done this, and I guess, they didn't presumably go bankrupt from how expensive and time consuming it was. I mean, wouldn't you say it's at least feasible that other counties similarly sized could somehow pull it off?
Yeah, I would say that's potentially also makes it a redundant law if, that we know that counties are able to do this and are doing a good job.
Okay. All right. I'll stop there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Delegate Carr, for bringing this bill. Good questions by Delegate Stewart. I had some of those same questions about, I think, frequently the term unintended consequences is used when folks oppose bills, but Mr. Nyberg did not, in my mind, did not qualify that to say what he envisioned by unintended consequences. But my question is around MML's lack of opposition versus MACO's opposition. It's occasionally happens that these two, very vocal and visible organizations have different views, but more often than not, I think they are on the same page. So I'm just curious about that. Was there a change that you made or something in the bill, Delegate Carr, that made it, at least, I don't know if it's right to say they support it, but at least MML doesn't oppose it, whereas MACO does. Could you explain that?
Yeah, thank you, Delegate, for that great question. So, as you know, I'm a former municipal official, so I'm trying to be sensitive to, the needs and concerns of municipalities. And I didn't believe this bill would be burdensome at all on municipalities, because you can see in the list, there's the jurisdictions that already do this, and then the jurisdictions that don't do this, and there's not a huge increase in the number of registered lobbyists, maybe a tiny amount more. So, based on my research, I didn't believe it would be burdensome, and I did work closely with MML, and gave them an advance copy and talked it through with their staff. So I think I was able to satisfy their concerns so that when it came up to their legislative committee, nobody really raised an issue or said, hey, this will create a problem for us.
Oops. Thank you for that explanation. And also, I guess I would just encourage you to continue working with Mr. Nyberg on the amendment you talked about that is underway, and maybe that will satisfy MACO. So thank you for the effort there. I think it's important.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Delegate. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 59. Next, we'll move on to Delegate Healy's House Bill 63.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to present this bill to you. It came to me as a result of a constituent issue. I had no idea that this was a problem until I was helping a constituent deal with the fallout. What the bill does to remedy this situation is if you get a parking ticket and the license plate is stolen and it's on the wrong car, the ticket should be sent, the ticket writer should compare the license tag number to the registration at MVA and not give a ticket if they don't match, because there is a problem in the state about stolen license plates. The MVA told me today that in fiscal 21, there were 1,732 tags reported stolen. And so far in fiscal year 2022, up through December, there were 834 stolen tags. This is what happened to my constituent. He's a senior citizen and has disabilities and has a disabled tag for his vehicle, which was stolen. He reported the theft to county police and to the MVA. And the MVA gave him a new tag for his car, and they voided out the old one, and that should have been the end of the story, but it wasn't. The thief apparently put the tag on another car and left it in a county garage. And after a while, a county meter reader wrote a ticket and sent it to him, and it shouldn't have never have been sent to him because he no longer had the tag. The MVA had no record of him being connected to it. How that all happened, don't know, but he got the ticket and he thought, oh, this is just a mistake, and he didn't pay it. And he really contacted me after he had gotten several notices of late charges added on to a ticket he should never have gotten for a tag that he didn't own, that wasn't connected to his car anymore. And he had missed his day in court because of all the delays. And he, as I said, is a senior citizen with mobility issues of his own, which is why he had a disabled tag in the first place. So this took a lot of work on my part. I went through the county government, and eventually it got resolved in his favor because he clearly was a mistake and it should never have happened. This bill is offered in the hope that we can prevent this from happening ever again. That before the ticket is written, whoever's writing the ticket can look at the license plate and see that it doesn't go with the car that it's on. In this particular case, there was only one license plate that was stolen. So if the person had just walked around to the back of the car and seen the other side of it, they would have known it wasn't a legitimate license plate. This is a very simple bill. It's creating just really correcting a situation that should never exist in the first place. The fiscal note says it has no anticipated material effect on state or local government. And I certainly hope that that is the case. I can see some administrative changes may be necessary, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a heavy burden. But it is a heavy burden for our constituents who have to deal with fallout that's not their fault when their license plate is stolen and then used or left on another car. So that's the bill, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. Delegate Jacobs has a question.
Yes, thank you. Delegate Healy, have you done, in your research, did you check any other states to see if they have similar policies?
I did not. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, that is the end for the end of the bill hearing for House Bill 63. And Delegate Healy, why don't you continue with House Bill 105?
All right, thank you very much. House Bill 105 is a cross-file of a Senate bill that was heard just earlier this week. It's gotten a lot of publicity in the state and nationally because AAA is very much in favor of updating our move over, slow down law. And as you may know, I was the sponsor of the first bill that passed in this area. And I have also been involved in updating it before and expanding it. What the bill does is basically it expands this to include disabled vehicles displaying hazard lights, road flares, or other caution signals like traffic cones or caution signs. So if a driver is approaching the disabled vehicle displaying these signals, they must make a lane change or slow down just as they do now under other circumstances with tow trucks and emergency vehicles and police cars, so forth. And last year there were 1,847 citations issued for the current law. There are definitely problems, and AAA has had wonderful support for this. They've done polling. It's been successfully done in several other states. And I know that they're going to have detailed testimony on this. We also have the support, and I think I'd like to mention, Delegate Krim mentioned, but we actually do have support from the Chief of Police of the Maryland Transit Authority and from MDOT. They actually support this bill. So, and there are letters of support for them. So I hope that we can get this done this year and save some lives. People get stranded on the side of the road. And if they can put their flashers on, they can be much safer if we have this bill. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we go to Regina Ali, and then we'll take questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Regina Ali. I'm the Public and Government Affairs Manager with AAA Mid-Atlantic, representing over 1 million members here in the state of Maryland. I'm also representing the Washington, D.C. area as well now. So thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to address the committee. And many thanks to Delegate Healy as well as Senator Waldstreicher for putting in what we feel is a very important piece of legislation. Quite simply, as Delegate Healy indicated, this bill will be yet another expansion of Maryland's existing slow down, move over law. AAA has been at the forefront across the country getting these laws passed, and Maryland has been awesome in helping move these bills forward to not only include our first responders, our police, our tow truck operators, most recently our service and utility vehicles or operators of those vehicles. And what we're seeing is, unfortunately, despite the fact that we do have these strong laws on the books, we are still losing lives on the side of the roadway. And that also includes disabled motorists. That's motorists that are there with a disabled vehicle and possibly trying to change a tire on their own, what have you. In the AAA family, we just saw a recent death again just a few months ago. where a AAA contractor was struck and killed after just changing a spare tire. We know that a lot of motorists, despite every state in the country having some form of this law, are not always aware of what the law is. They're not always certain which vehicles or which groups this applies to. We believe that HB 105 would take away a lot of that confusion so that motorists would know if you see a vehicle on the side of the road with flashing lights, they need to slow down, and if safe to do so, move over. It's really quite simple. I can tell you that according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, they estimate that 566 people were killed and another nearly 14,400 injured each year between 2016 and 2018 in vehicle crashes involving a disabled vehicle. So again, we can't thank Delegate Healy enough for her support, and we urge a favorable report from the committee. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'm back. So is that the only witness who's being testified? Okay, in that case, let's go to questions. The first question appears to be from Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Delegate Healy, have you had any input from the Maryland State Police?
They do, I believe they do support. I'm just trying to remember the.
I know you said the
police
chiefs do.
Police Chief, Colonel Kevin Anderson, as chair of the Traffic Safety Committee of the Maryland MTA. Let's see if.
It looks like
I think Regina might have an answer.
Yeah, Regina
She might have
looks
the
like she
answer,
has the
and maybe Regina
Sure.
could answer the question.
Sure, I'm happy to. So thank you, Delegate Healy. Thank you for the question, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo. So we certainly, in working through this bill, reached out to the Maryland State Police. They were, while they're not supporting on record, they were certainly fine with the language in the bill. We looked at a couple of states that have passed legislation and modeled this to some degree on Pennsylvania's law. There are 7 states that do currently have this law in the books. I can tell you that the Maryland Transportation Authority Police are certainly supportive of it, and the testimony we have is not only from MDOT, but also from Chief Kevin Anderson, but with Maryland Transportation Authority Police, and he is also the chair of the Maryland Chiefs Transportation Committee. So we have the support of both of those groups as well. And one thing I did fail to mention in my testimony, Delegate Healy mentioned that AAA had done some polling, which we did in the fall of last year, and 84% of Maryland drivers polled indicated that they would support this legislation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next question goes to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Delegate Healy, this is incredibly important legislation. I know we've had hearings where we've been demonstrated, we've had demonstrations of actual technology that kind of helps with this. I just wonder, how is this enforceable? How is this enforceable, and how does the language, the law get out? To Regina's point, excuse me, for other jurisdictions that have done this, have they seen a decrease?
Well, I think that Regina would know what other jurisdictions, other states have done, but I would say, we have a track record now that the law, this is an expansion of the law, and I think that it will help because it will remove some of the confusion that, is it this vehicle or that vehicle that I have to slow down for or move over for? And I'm hopeful that if this bill is passed, the regulations that go into effect will add additional signage so people will know. I know if you travel up and down the East Coast, I drove to Florida a couple of years ago. As you enter the state, a lot of times they tell you this is a move over, slow down state. And, sometimes it's just for police vehicles, but the more vehicles that it's for, people get in the habit of doing it. And I think it becomes self-enforcing after a while.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Terraza. Delegate Terraza?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Delegate Healy, for doing this bill. This is more of an answer to Delegate Frazier Hidalgo's question, because I was working on a similar bill And I did reach out to the chiefs of police multiple times. So they are well aware that this bill is being worked on. And I've had opportunity to, I reached out to them twice and nudged them again. I didn't hear back from them, but they are well aware that this bill is being worked on. So if that helps any.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 105. Let's turn to House Bill 77, Delegate Chan. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did. Good job, Chairman Harvey.
Okay.
Awesome. It's been a year anyway. But thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, and to the esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present my bill to you that is of extreme concern to members in my community of Hagerstown. Several constituents have contacted me with complaints regarding dirt bike riders. Dirt bikes, they're fun to ride when they're used responsibly. They bob and weave in and around cars on the streets. They pop wheelies on the main roads, and they run stoplights, nearly causing accidents. All of these constituents have pleaded with me as their representative, please do something. Over the summer, I witnessed and was nearly involved in an accident regarding people who ride dirt bikes on main roads. The driver of the dirt bike zipped and weaved in and around traffic, and I nearly hit him. It scared me to death, more so for his life and not my own. The driver looked at me, laughed, and sped off. I have no problem with people who desire to ride their dirt bikes, but when they are doing it in an unsafe manner, this concerns me. Something has to be done. As the sponsor of this bill, I'm receptive to a friendly amendment in an effort to keep us safe all on the roads as we're driving. I look forward to a favorable response, and I thank you for your time. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm sorry, what does the bill do?
This bill will provide a more stringent penalty for riding reckless and negligent on the roads on a dirt bike, if they're riding on sidewalks, if they're weaving in and out of traffic, driving down the wrong way of the street. This bill will elicit a fine and up to 1 year prison sentence at the discretion of the judge.
Okay, we're going to hear from Emily Keller and Joseph Michael, and then we will entertain questions for all of the proponents. So Emily Keller of the City of Hagerstown, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members. I am Emily Keller. I am mayor of the City of Hagerstown, and I'm here to offer my support for House Bill 77. I don't generally support harsher consequences, as I tend to believe that finding solutions in rehab and diversion is the way to go. But in this circumstance, a consequence is appropriate. In the City of Hagerstown, we have had a tremendous increase of dangerous dirt bike riding in our streets. Our chief does not allow our officers to chase, as that is clearly extremely dangerous. But when a rider is pulled over or caught, they currently just receive a driving citation, very similar to texting and driving. Quite frankly, they don't care about it, and it's not deterring their activity at all. Now, I'm not talking about dirt bikes that are following traffic laws driving down the street. We've had bikers stop traffic completely, circle cars, harass citizens, go the wrong way, run red lights, and have people on our public sidewalks. We had a dirt bike circle a police officer throwing stones at him and then go the wrong way up a one-way road when another cruiser came to try to stop him. HPD is receiving 20 to 30 calls a day for incidents involving these dirt bikes. It's frustrating for our police force because of the lack of options they have to help solve the issue. We've had 4 riders who have had very, very serious injuries. One is permanently disabled. And while they're riding on our public sidewalks during the day, there are school kids and daycares in those same areas. My biggest fear is that someone else is going to get hurt or someone's going to get killed if we don't find a way to curb this behavior. In the arrests that we've had involving the dirt bikes, it's included assault on a police officer, theft over $1,000, CDS charges, 2 known shootings, and other gang activities. 6 stolen bikes have been retrieved. Again, we aren't talking about young kids riding dirt bikes and following the laws. It's a very serious problem for Hagerstown and across the state. We would appreciate your support, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I didn't realize you were the mayor. I would have recognized you as such. Joseph Michael, who's with the Washington County State's Attorney's Office, or actually.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Himself. Go ahead.
Yes, it's Joe Michael, Deputy State's Attorney. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I am here I run the District Court Division of the State's Attorney's Office. And of course, that includes traffic enforcement. The central issue I want to bring to the court's attention, in addition to the mayor and delegates' attention, is that when a citation is given, the recipient frequently or almost always blows it off, doesn't come to court, and because they're not licensed, and the sanction for not coming to court is largely administrative on someone's license, they never see the judge, and there's no consequence. So the part of the statute that I would like to emphasize is the must appear nature and the fact that there is a penalty. I'm not suggesting that a person who rides a dirt bike in a negligent fashion on a sidewalk should one's injured, etc. But you got to get them through the courthouse door. And that's the problem we're having. We're certainly having citations because these are all moving violations that result in citations, but these are frequently people that aren't licensed anyway, and there's no license to suspend, and they don't care about that. And also sometimes some of this reckless driving, dangerous driving, the chases go into parks and off roads, and that wouldn't necessarily be an appropriate moving violation without this. So I encourage the committee to give this a favorable report, and the part I would emphasize is making sure that they come to court or suffer the sanction to be held to court if not. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the panel has for me. Thank you.
Okay, we have a number of people who have questions. First is Delegate Ampry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I have a lot of, for such a short bill, I have a lot of questions. And I guess one of the questions that I have as an attorney, first things first, is just defining some of the terms here. I think that I want to get an idea of when you say overtaking or passing, what does that mean and what does that look like? And how will a police officer be able to determine whether that person is actually breaking this law as written? And I have two more questions at this, but just want to get an idea of the language here, because like passing a vehicle, I mean, the way you describe some of the more dangerous incidents that have taken place, they go beyond just the reckless driving. It goes more towards the assault and the other things you're describing that have been described here. But I want to get an idea of what is overtaking and passing? What does that look like? And what? Just want to get an idea of how police would be able to define that here.
Thank you, Delegate. I appreciate your question, and I'll answer it to how I understand it, and certainly Mayor Keller can offer more insight. But what I understand it to be and what I have witnessed is if you have, there's a main strip in Hagerstown called Franklin Street, and it takes you straight into the city, into the downtown area. And it's a one-way street, 2 lanes. And what I encountered was if you've got 2 cars coming down that 2-lane street, then the dirt bike's rider is coming in between those 2 cars and whipping and kind of going in and out of those cars. That's what I've witnessed, and that's how I understand overtaking. You've got 2 cars going down this one-way street, and the dirt bike rider is in between those 2 cars, going in and out, bobbing and weaving traffic. Mayor Keller, if you understand it to be more than that, if you could please oblige the committee.
I think there are a lot of different examples. I mean, we've had a situation where we had a whole host of bikes. I think there was around 10 of them completely stop traffic in our square. And they were doing wheelies and other things. So no traffic could move at all. I think that's a pretty obvious example. Going the wrong way is a problem. But I mean, we have had bikes that have just completely stopped traffic and circled cars, just for fun, really, it looks like.
Let me jump in here with a lawyer's answer to a lawyer's question. The statute defines overtaking and passing under the Maryland Transportation Section 21301, which is rather lengthy. I won't take all the time, but it's all the illegal passing that you would do in any motor vehicle, passing, driving on the wrong side of the road, passing a double yellow, passing on the right, those types of things. It's everything that the legislature has already defined. I understand the delegates' concern, but I think that the bill is short and has taken pains to adopt three recognized statutes that when a person violates these statutes on the dirt bike, then they're hauled into court.
So
I hope that answers your question, Delegate.
Under current law, would anyone be subject to a year in prison for breaking these laws in a normal car?
No, they would not, because they
Only on a bike you'd be subject to prison time, but in a car you wouldn't. Isn't that correct?
Well, stop for a second. The idea is that the licensed driver of a motor vehicle would not be subject to prison time, but the unlicensed or the suspended driver would be facing either 60 days or a year in jail and have to show up for court if they broke the law. And I think that's what we're focused at. We're not penalizing the behavior so much as getting a way to get someone who doesn't necessarily have a license or even need a license to operate one of these vehicles, if they do it off the road, into court. And that's the issue that's being addressed, Delegate. I hope you understand that.
Sure.
So yeah, the same person who would break an ordinary rule of the road, who was also unlicensed or has a revoked or suspended license, would face that jail time.
Got it. And then just two more quick questions. The other concern I have with this legislation is I feel as though you described that that you all do not pursue those on dirt bikes currently. So my worry is that, are you not worried about that if you have a harsher penalty, that people will drive more recklessly to avoid interactions with law enforcement, so they won't be subject to a harsher penalty? So
could I answer that, Madam Delegate, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Delegate, if you saw how these folks are driving,
Hold on. Delegate Ambrey, were you finished with your question?
I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to add more.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, the core of my question is, does this law create a more dangerous environment? In that, is there consideration for the fact that if you have a harsher penalty, people who would normally take a fine or deal with law enforcement respectfully, would they not want to get away and put themselves and others in more danger by trying to escape this harsher penalty that's now in place?
May I answer the question, please?
You can now, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I can't see everybody, and I apologize.
That's fine.
I think that the answer to that question is the type of driving that we're talking about is already so incredibly dangerous if you witness it, that it can't get more dangerous. So while I agree with the logic of what you're saying, is that when you increase a penalty, people are more likely to run. If you witness this actual activity in the narrow streets of Hagerstown and what is happening on a daily basis, it is already fatally dangerous, and the quantum of danger can't rise any higher because the folks are running when they're not chased. So the police aren't chasing; they're not going to chase more. So no, I think because there's a no chase policy in Hagerstown, now maybe somewhere else where they chase folks, maybe so, but for where we're coming from, no.
Okay. So, and this is the last question, and I'll allow my colleagues to continue with their questions as well. I look forward to hearing them. But the last question I have is, statistically, who are these people who are violating this law? Number one, two-part question: who is violating this law statistically? And I'm talking about age, other demographics, and then has there been any implementation of programs or things to try and encourage more positive behavior with these dirt bikes?
I can answer that, and then I'd like to reach to Mayor Keller to support what she has.
Sure.
My understanding is it crosses many different demographics. It's not necessarily race racially segregated, meaning it's only the Black people riding the dirt bikes. It spans across many ages, from young teenagers to young adults. That's my understanding of what I've witnessed and what I've been informed of. So Mayor Keller, if you have more to offer to that.
Yes, and our chief was actually pulling those stats and wanted to be here today, and unfortunately he was unable to make it. But just with the discussion that I've had with him, and also looking at the arrest records over the past several months, it certainly is not just young people. It's kind of a variety of people. One of the arrests that we made was not even from Hagerstown. Him and his group hauled their bikes because they wanted to ride on Hagerstown streets because they said they were more fun. So, I mean, it's definitely a wide variety. As far as programs, we've had the chief into our mayor and council meetings to have discussions publicly with what the public can do to help. We did some PSAs through the city of Hagerstown and have also had meetings with other municipalities to see what they're doing. And at this point, we just thought implementing legislation was the way to go.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your answer.
Thank you, Delegate.
Next question goes to Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Thank you. Just to be kind of crystal clear, because I know we talked a lot about it. Can someone, I don't know if it's you, Delegate, or the Deputy Attorney, can identify exactly what is the law now and exactly what will the law be with this bill? Just those two pieces, because it kind of was, the testimony was a little bit in different places, and I want to make sure
Yes.
at least myself understand exactly what we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Michael, could you please speak to the current law? And I can certainly speak to where we're trying to go with above and beyond the current law. Did we lose Mr. Michael?
He's still up on his little, it looks like he's still there, but I don't hear him.
I mean, I did gather one is not incarcerable, the other is incarcerable. I mean, we could figure it out in subcommittee a little bit more, but we talked about it. It was talked about at different stages of testimony, and I was just hoping to get this is where we are, this is where we want to be.
Right.
If you don't know, we could do that in subcommittee.
Yes, okay. I can do a little more research and get back to you on that.
All right.
If you want, Mr. Joseph is just reconnected to the call.
Oh, okay. Do you want to ask that question of Mr. Michael?
Is he available now? Mr. Michael, are you available?
Well, we could probably, Dave, we could probably get your answer from our legal counsel. So yeah, let's move on to Delegate Sheila Ruth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Delegate Ampry sort of asked my questions as well, but I did just want to follow up a little bit. And I'm also concerned about the enforcement of this. And look, this is a problem. We have these dirt bikes in my community as well, and they do drive recklessly and dangerously. But I wonder, how do you enforce something like this when they are driving so fast and you can't give chase? How do you enforce it?
If I may look to some information that was shared with me by Mayor Keller, I believe you also have the information that Chief Kiefer shared regarding the arrests that have been conducted thus far.
Right.
And how they've been done.
Yes, thank you, Delegate. So we don't chase, but we have had situations where they have just pulled over, or a police officer has caught them at the right time at a stop sign or something like that. We also have asked the community members to help us identify where the bikes are being kept. And they have confiscated several of them that way, and then been able to compare to the footage we have, because we have cameras all around the city. So it's been a mixture of ways to enforce.
And do you know if that's true in all jurisdictions, that this policy of no chase is true, or are there jurisdictions that do chases?
That I don't know.
I'm just concerned about the safety of it, and kind of really the same thing that Delegate Ampry was asking about. The other question that I wanted to ask also sort of follows up on Delegate Ampry's questions. And I hear what you're saying, Mayor Keller. You said that it's not one demographic. There's it's people of different ages. It's not all young people, but for particularly for a young person, and certainly some of them are young people, I am concerned that arrest will start that person into the criminal justice system, which then, can have a negative impact on their future. And I was intrigued by the testimony from B360 Baltimore, where they have a program where they actually work with young dirt bike riders and offer them opportunities and encourage their talents. And I just wondered if your jurisdictions have tried this type of approach or worked with any groups like this.
Sorry, Mayor Keller.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I had a really fruitful conversation with Miss Brittany from B360 regarding what they're doing in Baltimore City to help people who enjoy riding dirt bikes and want to do it in a safe manner, and even incorporating STEM activities to teach them how to fix their bikes and how to repair their bikes, things of that nature. So to my understanding, those types of programs have not yet been implemented in Hagerstown, but certainly we can consider that and see what kind of deeper conversations can come of that. I recall that there used to be an area in the Hagerstown community where persons could ride their dirt bikes and do so legally, but that place no longer exists, is no longer in operation. So Mayor Keller can offer more information if she knows more about programs for people like this.
Thank you, Delegate. So I share in your concern with causing a pipeline to prison. And that's kind of why I started out with saying, I generally don't support harsher punishment. I am certainly willing to reach out to Baltimore and find out what they're doing and see if it's something that we could implement in the city of Hagerstown. I mean, I'm all for diversion and what we can do to help solve this issue and not just charge someone with a crime. I just think after the last several months and how many dangerous situations we had and accidents that we had and the assaulting on not only just our police officers, but on our citizens, we're just looking for any solution possible to try to help.
Thank you.
Delegate Terraza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I hear, first of all, let me say this is a real problem and it's a huge problem in my district. And I would say that it doesn't necessarily follow any particular demographic in terms of who is riding those dirt bikes, but isn't it possible, on Delegate Cham, that whether or not the demographics of who's riding it are riding these is based on a specific demographic, that the enforcement could be disproportionate by a specific demographic? I mean, is there anything preventing that?
If I understand your question correctly, Delegate, I just want to parrot it back to you. Are you stating that there could be some unintentional outcomes of this bill that may become law, that it may unintentionally target a certain demographic of people?
Well, I'm just concerned that
and what are we doing to prevent that?
Yeah, that the enforcement could unintentionally or impact people of color. I guess that's my concern, is that while the demographic of those riding those bikes might be diverse, the enforcement could potentially be less so.
Right. Well, that's a good question. I appreciate that, Delegate. My hope is that we can teach this demographic of people to engage in behaviors that are not inappropriate or legal, to keep them out of the arenas of going down the path of juvenile detention centers and pipeline to prison. The bill certainly wasn't written in that fashion to encourage that. It's written with the intention of preventing this behavior from occurring in the future. And my logic in it is, if people know that the crime that they could be charged with and the consequences of such, that it will deter them from engaging in such. That's my hopeful optimism. Maybe I'm the only one out there that's optimistic in that respect, to think that when people know that, a young person know that, this is the consequence if I do this behavior, if I ride my dirt bike down a sidewalk, that I could possibly spend 1 year in juvenile detention. Maybe that will deter them from doing it. So.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And then I guess it was, I forget the attorney that we were talking with, who I
Right here.
Oh, okay.
Joe Michael.
It sounded like you were saying that the issue was that that we needed to get folks to come into court. I mean, is it possible that a bill could be drafted to require people to come into court without there being jail time involved?
Well, there is one statute like that, and that's 16303H.
We're having trouble. We're having trouble hearing you.
How's that? Any better?
It's better now. Yeah.
Sorry, I put the camera on. I think that I can't have both here. I'm in a parking lot. Sorry about that. But there's one statute like that, 16303H. I can tell you, I'm in court every day. It becomes more of a nuisance, including for the defendants, because while it's quote must appear, people still don't necessarily come for it. But that's a good point. And I want to piggyback on that about one of the most important aspects of this is, in order to have a juvenile person under 18 come to juvenile court instead of getting a traffic ticket, is that it has to be a crime that, not crime, a traffic violation that, if the person was an adult, would carry incarceration. So if a juvenile gets a speeding ticket, they go to adult court. If they get a ticket that has a period of potential incarceration, then they go to juvenile court. So that's one of the important aspects of this too.
Well, okay, hold on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to direct our counsel to see if we can craft legislation, if we decide to go there, to require appearance in court, even if there is not even if there isn't jail time. We'll look to see if we can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any more questions, Delegate Terraza?
No, I see there's lots of questions. I'm gonna.
Okay. Yeah, Delegate Weigel is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my questions have been answered. I did have one more. I know that it seems like the direction of the legislature has been to try to avoid jail time and have other methods to turn people around. Do you all think that like a requirement for community service would be a strong enough deterrent? And do we have the ability to require a certain number of hours of community service in lieu of jail time?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Sure.
Good afternoon, Delegate Weibel. It certainly could be required, but unless there is a sanction, then the person who is not going to comply is not going to comply. So, would love to give them the chance to do community service would be wonderful, and only if they don't do the community service then. But unless there is the potential of some ratchet up, the compliance with community service is very weak. I've done a lot of it. We do a lot of diversion of our cases, and many people comply, but those that don't, there needs to be a sanction to get them to comply. That's my experience.
All right, I agree. Thank you.
Before I recognize Delegate Stewart, Mr. Michael, are you trying to say that we have to have jail time in order to get people to comply, and that there's no way to get them to come to court unless there's jail time? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the way the system works.
Okay, well, fair enough. I'll just make sure legal counsel knows. I mean, I think we can pass a law to do anything we want, so that might be something we have to take into account. Delegate Stewart.
Let me help you out there, because there's consonant bills that I could point you to. 16303H is the one that has a mandatory attendance compliance. And the other one is proposed, and I'm sorry I don't have the bill number, but it's the bill requiring those defendants that have injured someone severely in a negligent driving, they need to come to court. They can't pay their ticket in advance. But the issue we have here is that there's a basic ethos maybe to the dirt bike riders that we are talking about, that not only do they want to be chased by the police, in my opinion, or want to make a spectacle, that not coming to court is part of the rebel image of this. I don't know how to put it. So there you go.
Okay, Delegate Stewart's got the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first on this issue, yeah, I mean, I've actually personally put in a number of bills before that I don't think had any problem being drafted, that had a must appear for driving violations that had no criminal penalty attached. So I definitely think that's something we can do. But anyway, my question is, I suppose for either the sponsor or the mayor, I think there was a brief mention from the sponsor that there used to be a place where people could ride their dirt bikes legally, but there's no anymore. And I think we may have dropped the thread on that and started talking about other issues. But Madam Mayor, could you talk a little bit more about, number one, if there was a facility that closed that may have led to a proliferation of dirt bike riding on city streets? And number two, I know that in other cities, and honestly, I know this only from Googling this during all the other questions, but I know a number of, obviously this is not confined to Maryland, it's not confined to Baltimore City and Hagerstown, Cleveland, Philadelphia, you name it, have had these battles. In fact, apparently New York City's previous mayor had this big spectacle where he brought out like a bulldozer and bulldozed a bunch of illegal dirt bikes to show how the city felt about it. But from my cursory research, it seems like there is a broad consensus that it's hard to get rid of this activity from criminalization. It's very difficult for all the reasons that we've talked about. And that perhaps an easier path is just to build a park so that people can ride dirt bikes legally on a park and they have their own dedicated space. So my two-part question is, one, was there a facility that existed at one time that was closed down? And number two, have there been any discussions, at least in Hagerstown, about possibly resurrecting a safe space where people could do this?
Thank you, Delegate. So there was a privately owned park at one time in Washington County. It was not in the city of Hagerstown, and they had tournaments there. It has been closed for at least 8 years. I want to say probably more so 10. I think it's something that we have talked about briefly with our chief of police and our city administrator of, is that something that we would be able to do in the city of Hagerstown? It's certainly something we can look at, but we haven't really explored that conversation now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Delegate Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think quite a few of my questions have kind of been answered from my colleagues through their line of questioning. But the one thing I kind of wanted to kind of pick up again is this conversation around diversion. But what I wanted to understand, though, in terms of the diversion piece is how many individuals, I guess, over the years or yearly, are you either identifying as potential citee or you have given citations to? What does that look like? What are those numbers?
If I may, Mayor Keller?
Sure, go ahead and answer.
Okay, thank you. Based on the information that was shared with me by our Police Chief Kiefer, from April 2021 to present, we've had 20 arrests, mostly for traffic offenses. Yeah, and there's some other narratives here, but for the most part, to quantify it, there have been 20 arrests that have been mostly for traffic offenses.
Okay, got it. So So with those 20 arrests since 2021, it's the opinion of the sponsor and others that the only next step is that we should have this statewide law that would have up to $1,000 fine and also have up to 1 year of incarceration. Is that correct?
That is where we decided that if we need to be that punitive to help curtail this problem. But again, we are, I'm open to any amendments to help us certainly resolve the problem, to fix the problem. And if there are any friendly amendments that might help us do so, I would consider such. It seems like all the practices that have been put in place seem to not be working.
So I guess the other question I have is those 20 arrests were, and I was on a call, so I came in a little bit late, but I did hear that in Hagerstown, there is a stretch of road. And we have one here in Baltimore. Orleans, it's a straight stretch, and oftentimes people that illegally ride, it's prime for them to use that to ride and showcase. So is that the main stretch that you refer to, Madam Mayor? Is that primarily where most of these arrests have taken place? Are they pretty much happening only in a certain stretch of the town?
No, it's all over our town. I mean, they definitely like to go down our dual highway and Franklin Street, which is what Delegate Jam was referring to. But we have this issue all over town.
And with regard to your, at least in the high traffic areas where this seems to be more prevalent, the most prevalent, has there been any effort to have police presence there? Which I would imagine would deter people from riding in those areas, and especially if it's a high traffic area, more likely to find themselves coming in contact with other moving vehicles. Has there been a focus to really focus on cutting down on certain high traffic areas as being an area where these riders would ride and disrupt traffic?
So yes, we did an operation for several weeks. The police really focused on this, and quite frankly, it made it worse. The riders were circling the police cars. If we had police on feet walking the beat, they were circling our police officers. It didn't really cut down the way that you think it would.
And my last question, because I know there's more, my last question to that point is, how much do you think that people know that this is actually illegal to do? I know this might seem like a crazy question I'm asking, but in all honesty, if individuals are still riding around police officers that are there to, that, as you say, to monitor this, how much do you think that people know that this is illegal activity, or that this is not appropriate, or legal, I guess is really the proper terminology? Do you think people know that they are not supposed to be doing this?
Absolutely. I think it's fairly common sense that doing a wheelie in the middle of the road and then circling around a vehicle
not common sense
is illegal.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't mean common sense, because there's a lot of things that people think that are common sense that are legal to do, right? I mean, is it known that this is illegal to do? Is the question that I'm asking you.
I would say absolutely.
Before I recognize the next question, Madam Mayor, how big is your police force?
Well, unfortunately, like many municipalities, we are really hurting for police officers right now. We have 102 sworn, but right now we are about 33 officers down, with 5 in the academy.
Okay. Delegate Boyce has a question. Regina?
I'm sorry, I've got 2 screens and I got to get the cursor back. I'm sorry. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Delegate Cham. It's so good to see you. We have not connected yet. So I had a couple of questions, and I think they all touch on what everyone else has talked about today. So one of my concerns is that the fiscal notes, while the bill defines dirt bike in another code, it says that there is no real applicable definition for dirt bike. And the other issue I see is that if a fine is imposed, up to $1,000 for jail time, and if someone is in jail, those fees will be eaten by someplace like Baltimore City, who would have to retain those individuals because we're the only kind of preach-out facility. So I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit more about that, about the definition and about the fees incurred to Baltimore City.
Thank you, Delegate. It's great to see you as well. Yes, so according to the analysis that was done by regarding the fiscal note of this bill, there is not an applicable definition of a dirt bike. And furthermore, to touch on your concern about the fact that Baltimore City will be the one to eat the cost of this, to my understanding, that is correct. That is true.
Okay, so is it appropriate to work on a concrete definition of dirt bike? Was my first question. And two, I believe Delegate Wyville, AKA Bill's point, it is, and is jail time, I think for an egregious act, I think the laws already speak to, in the case of if someone else is killed or harmed, the law seems like it would apply. But for this, if there is no injury to another person or death of another person, would community service be appropriate? And I'm not talking about like, a couple hours here and there, it's a year's time spent somewhere very specific. And in those cases, if they don't meet or adhere to that requirement, then we can potentially talk about what those additional penalties would be.
That's a welcomed idea, Delegate, to look at the community service piece of this as a possible amendment, and not make it something that's easy peasy, but something that's really gonna take some time for people to engage in across several weeks or a year, or whatever. We can certainly kind of dig through that a little bit.
Yeah.
And
And I guess I would want to follow up, just last question to Mr. Michael, in that he clearly distinctly stated, wanting to get people in court. And I'm wondering, does this path work in that way, in that if they don't fulfill the requirements of community service, then it is subject to a hearing in court?
If you draft it that way, that would certainly go a long way. And as the delegate said, I mean, if that would be a unique approach, but that doesn't mean it's not a great approach, and that one that would be welcomed in maybe this statute or many other statutes. The other thing, Madam Delegate, that I would point out is
you're on mute, sir. Mr.
I'm sorry about that.
You stopped at the point you wanted to make.
Okay. What I wanted to tell you was that if somebody is seriously harmed, let's say that a dirt bike or any automobile jumped a curb and ran over someone but didn't kill them, that is still just a payable ticket. So that's
so that. But I guess I'm clarifying, and this is also what we can talk about in subcommittee. I don't want to take up any more time, but doesn't current law already cover if there is an incident of injury or death?
Of death, yes. If it is grossly negligent. Of serious injury, no, there is not. That is a payable ticket with any vehicle, unless you're texting or on a handheld device. Then no, that is not a must appear offense. There is no jail time.
Okay, guys, let me just suggest that this question of what we have to do in order to get people to show up in court will rely on our counsel to figure that out, okay? Because I'm pretty convinced that we can write a law to do whatever we want to do. The last question is going to go to Delegate Ampry, then we're going to move on to the opponents, and the rest of this will be handled in the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to have a second bite at the apple. I just wanted to had a quick question just to better understand the severity of the issue in Hagerstown in regards to safety, and if there was any data that could give us more insight into how many accidents are taking place as a result of these dirt bike riders, and in comparison to other vehicle or other types of accidents, and what the percentage difference there is, right? So just want to get a better idea of, if we're going to go to the severity of incarcerating people for riding on dirt bikes illegally, I want to know the severity of how much harm is actually being done. I've heard conversations around almost accidents or a lot of nuisance or putting people in danger, which is of course we don't want the dangerous things to happen, but what's the concrete data on the amount of accidents that have occurred that involve these dirt bikes, and what is that in comparison to other accidents that happen in Hagerstown?
Very good question, Delegate. Thank you very much. I would, if I may, I have to get those data from my chief of police or my Mayor Keller. She knows that, but I do not have those statistics before me right now, but I can certainly get that information to the committee.
Great. The committee would appreciate that. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll now turn to the opponents to the bill. First, Brian Alston.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Brian Alston with State Circle Strategies, here on behalf of B360. You have our written testimony, and you will also hear from Brittany Young, B360's Executive Director. We strongly oppose House Bill 77 as presented. The fiscal and policy note on page 1 states that enforcement can otherwise be handled with existing resources. This bill also seeks to impose prison time up to 1 year for a nonviolent offense. This flies in the face of many social justice reforms that this body passed last session. The fiscal note on page 3 also states that the number of people convicted of this proposed crime is expected to be minimal. Along with B360, the ACLU, and other organizations also oppose this bill. For these reasons, we respectfully ask for an unfavorable report on HB 77. Thank you for your consideration.
Maybe I'm living underneath a rock, but what is B360?
B360, I would defer to Brittany Young, who is going to be coming up next. She is the executive director, and she can really go into great detail of the organization.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
In
Chair.
that case, we'll go next to Brittany Young.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me. So yeah, I'm Brittany from B360. As we know, dirt bike riding is not synonymous to Baltimore or to Hagerstown. But what we saw was an opportunity not only grow STEM skills, but to grow people out of traffic. And so I'll talk about our work. Since 2017, we work with over 8,000 young people and counting. We've hired and trained more than 47 dirt bike rides and growing. And I can quantify that we've saved our city in Baltimore $1.7 million as of December 2021 by doing programming. What bills like this do, which is similar to the one we have already in Baltimore it is illegal to ride, own, and you can have a misdemeanor charge for it. It hasn't stopped dirt bike riding. What it has encouraged is more people to take to streets who are upset, who feel unheard. And what we're doing as a city is working with organizations like mine. In April 2021, we actually created a diversion program that got the right and help with dirt bike riders at the table and with our state's attorney's office. So instead of people going straight to jail for nonviolent offenses, they do training, programming, and work with us. We have a 100% retention rate. That means 100% of dirt bike riders that we see do not go back to the streets, and they are employed. The reason why they didn't join us today is because they're working in our classes. They are fathers, their mothers, their sisters, their little boys and little girls. What this bill does not address is what is the world we're looking forward to if a 17-year-old boy doesn't have a space to ride because people haven't made one for him. But if he takes to the streets, the only option he has is jail. The motorsports industry is $32 billion and it has no Black people in it yet. So what my real problem with this bill is it hasn't taken the time to address dirt bike riders. It has no real stance in showing that legislation is actually going to work. We should have learned from the issues in Baltimore that policies like this aren't favorable, and we can really lead progress in Maryland and lead progress in this space by being the first to actually pass a bill that will support an organization like mine that does work every day, that will support an organization like mine who's also ready to create space for dirt bike riders and really support people of all races, all creeds, all classes who feel unheard. So excuse me, I'm a little upset, but I've listened to this testimony for this whole time, and none of this has been based on any facts. And I was really upset too that if research was done, we are the only organization that exists in the world around dirt bikes, STEM, diversion, and no one reached out to us before crafting this bill. So I carry with me our students who do not want to be incarcerated, who do not want to be seen as offenders. I carry with us 2 people in our diversion program who do not want to go back to the streets and who no longer want to be seen as criminals. I should never have kids as young as 22-year-old with 25 offenses for dirt bikes and whatever else, just because nobody took the time to listen to them. And now we're undoing those.
If you could wrap up your testimony,
I'm done.
we would really appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And also we have Rashad Staten. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Rashad?
Yes, Elvin, thank you. You're one of the very few that get the name right, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm Rashad Staten. I'm a strong advocate and youth advocate across Baltimore City, but also nationwide. I currently served in previous roles as a Baltimore City Youth Commissioner and also served on Mayor's Dirt Bike Task Force that included civilian representation as I acted as a representative on dirt bike riders themselves, being that they could not show up at decision-making tables and talk to elected officials and law enforcement due to the mistrust and the skepticism that when they actually came to be solution-oriented, they would leave that same space and receive sealed warrants and arrests out for them because now they have exposed their actual information, their names, and their face. So I serve as a representative on behalf of some of the riders themselves. I'm a strong stance in opposition of this bill in itself because it's inequitable practices and the fact that it does not lift up anything that shows any asset or strength-based practices of this cultural phenom that we know that is highly participatory of Black and brown persons, all young people and adults. This is a multi-generational cultural phenom that we all have seen. And I think that this bill itself has only been lifted up based off of public misperception in the idea that is a public nuisance. After hearing much of everyone try to answer these questions, there's no validity or data that shows that this actually dirt bike riding should be enforced through extensive criminalization in itself, and that it will do nothing but increase social barriers that B360 and other advocates like myself are trying to remove to change the trajectory of our young people to then reduce the representation in STEM education and also into motocross activity across the country that needs to be more reflective of those that actually support it. I believe that these dollars can be reverted back into strength-based and asset opportunities that provide opportunities that are inclusive of programming, designated safe spacing, because in the state of Maryland, there's not one single designated safe space on private or public property where anyone can take their dirt bikes to actually do it in a safe manner in itself. And I just leave with these one or particular questions that I have today. If anyone can show me any data that correlates to how this non-criminal offense is now being subjugated with the same intensity of an actual criminal violation and how it does not compare. And they also just mentioned that of how these things did not show to any motor vehicle infractions itself, right? The next one that I want to ask you all is who would this actual bill impose on
Mr. Staten, if you could wrap up your testimony, the committee would appreciate it. And I know there are a lot of questions for you and Ms. Young that are probably coming up.
Perfect. I just want to make sure that as we look towards this bill, that we actually look at it with an inclusivity lens and an equitable lens, and that it shows up with some alternative options rather than imprisonments and fines that will cause even more disparities in communities that needs the help on behalf of our elected officials. I thank you, and I hope that you all are willing to be on the right side of justice.
Well, let me begin with a couple of questions. Ms. Young, would you please describe your organization, B360, because coming from Rockville, I've never heard of it, so I need to be educated.
Yep, no, we appreciate it. So our website is b360baltimore.org. We were just on Steve Harvey last week. But since 2017, I noticed two main problems in my city, but also across the country. One is Baltimore and major cities have an opportunity to grow workforce towards STEM careers that don't require degrees. In Baltimore, we have 120,000, but we don't have people who look like me. The second is following the Freddie Gray uprising, we also need
Well,
more.
hold on. May I interrupt you for 1 second? Is your organization primarily focused on career development for young people?
No. So the second thing we focus on too is diversion and reimagining public safety, as well as creating safe spaces.
Okay. So I have a question either for Ms. Young or Mr. Staten, and it's this. In the testimony of the proponents, they've talked very extensively about people, popping wheelies in the middle of the road and circling drivers. Putting aside what the proper way to respond to all this is, I'm going to assume that you would agree that that's unacceptable behavior on the roads, right?
Yes, we take a firm stance in wanting to be safe in slower streets. Yes, we're not advocating for people in streets.
Okay. First question goes to Delegate Sheila Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Young, I first just wanted to really thank you for your work. So I think you may have said this, but how many young people have you helped so far?
In Baltimore, it's been 8,000 and counting. We work with our city schools, our recs and parks. We do programming all year long. For adults, it's been 47. How our program works is we hire people who have nonviolent offenses, specifically dirt bike riders, to run our classes. And our diversion program with the State Attorney's Office, if you're referred to us after having a nonviolent offense like dirt bikes, instead of going straight to jail, you do training with us, and we've seen a 100% retention rate where no one goes back to riding dirt bikes in the streets. We actually hire them in our careers and our jobs for classes.
Great. And I think you just answered my second question, which was how do you reach out and find the young people and bring them in? And you're saying it's recommendations from arrests and things like that. Is that?
Yeah, a mix of all of the above. We have a good rapport with dirt bike riders. We have really strong engagement. And so what we've been able to do, which a lot of governments can't, is sit at multiple tables. So we can, be the middleman between the government and the riders. So our diversion program, because we're undoing a lot of policy issues in Baltimore, like I mentioned before, in our city, it's already a misdemeanor for riding and owning a dirt bike. So we're trying to make sure people don't go straight to jail, but instead they can work with us as we work on policy reform.
Great. But you also do classes for young people, and that's another way you reach people.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate Wyvil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Young, I also want to thank you for all the work you're doing to improve lives. I did have a question, and you'll have to forgive me because as I get older, my memory's not what it used to be, but it seems to me Baltimore used to ban the sale of dirt bikes within the corporate limits. Is that still the case?
Yes. You cannot purchase the dirt bike within our city limits.
Okay. I thought we had a bill a year or two ago that reversed that, but I guess I was wrong. So, all right. Thank you. That was all I had.
Next question goes to Delegate Wells.
Thank you. My question is for Ms. Young. It's just want to thank you for all that you do for our young people, and also for putting us on the map around some effective ways to support the dirt bike culture, but also to show that we're trying to do it in a safe way. I have two questions. My first question is to kind of talk a little bit more about the diversion, because as you heard with the previous panel, we talked a lot about community service. And so I'm curious, how does it work? Because I think about things like PBJ, which is still on your record. And obviously, the impetus is for individuals to work through completing all the steps for them to get it off. But I'm wondering, what is the relationship like with the state's attorney's office? Is it is it a plea agreement, or can you kind of explain how does it actually affect their record, at the inception of the offense, and then over time, how does it work towards either having it come off or preventing them from having a record in the first place?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I actually got to work with riders and our state's attorney's office to write the protocol and BPD. So how it works is that it's like a null process. It just doesn't exist. So people have existing misdemeanor charges for dirt bikes or violations, anything that's nonviolent. They do at least 20 hours of training and program with B360. Before that court hearing, we submit a letter on their behalf to get the charges expunged or dropped. And then they come back and work with B360, Job Opportunities Task Force, or Baltimore Court as a pipeline to jobs.
Thank you. And then my last question, because I think at the heart of this bill is around trying to change behavior, and people change behavior or don't change behavior for different reasons. So I'm just kind of hoping that you might be able to share anecdotally some of the things that you've seen as to how obviously people coming in contact with criminal justice system, or that may or may not be a diversion, but I think in the case of a lot of the folks that you serve, that's not always a key motivator. So I'm wondering, what is the main, the largest motivators that you've seen outside of a criminal aspect or charge that is really helping divert these, what you said, 8,000 youth and 400 something adults from ever going back to riding in the streets?
It's really been positive reinforcement. So it's nothing wrong with popping a wheelie. We stress that, but also stress we don't want it to be in traffic, right? And that's the main precursor. What we did instead was have programming. So all across the city of Baltimore and our recs, we actually teach programming. You can pop a wheelie, you can ride safely. And then this summer at the B&O Railroad Museum, we worked on a private partnership to give them 3 acres of a space. And so since we make opportunities for people to ride, that's been positive reinforcement, and that keeps them. And then secondly, we employ people, right? So all of our instructors are either STEM professionals or dirt bike riders. We keep people paid, and they like the feel of working with kids, and that's been behavior changing. And I would say a main anecdote is I can think about one of our riders, Mike. Now he's 23. Like a lot of riders in Baltimore, he rode on the streets, not because he just didn't, want to save space, because that was never an opportunity. He had a lot of arrests before working with us. By the time he was 21, though, he no longer went back to jail for dirt bikes. He worked for a company like Red Bull doing production. And now he's one of our lead instructors and our trainers. And that's like the positive mindset that we keep reinforcing with our riders in our community, is that, yeah, we get it. You want a space, but ride with us to get it. And more importantly, you can have more opportunities that we can present, because most dirt bike riders don't realize fixing and repairing a bike every day, because the parts are way too expensive, is a STEM skill. But that's the things we've been pulling out, is listening, honing into making sure they recognize their talent, and then also providing opportunities to not be in traffic. And it's been fruitful. We also convince people to wear helmets, which, was not easy, but all of our riders do as well.
Thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. Ms. Young, thank you again for your testimony and all your work. I share the sentiments of my colleagues who have talked about how, the service you're doing. And I personally think it's really cool that, the national leader on this issue is, from right here in Maryland. So thank you. My quick question is, have you been successful at trying to get the Baltimore City Council to give y'all some dedicated park space for the safe riding of these bikes? I think she might be frozen.
Ms. Young or Mr. Staten, can you?
Yes.
Are you on?
So until Ms. Young appears back, yes, we are actually in communication with our elected officials, our city council chairman, and actually Mayor Scott is in favor and a stark supporter of B360, and actually is working with our Recs and Parks and another department under the mayors and the city agencies to help us identify and assess 3 locations as we speak. So we're currently in that process of looking at 3 sites across Baltimore City that is either owned by or public property at the moment, and 1 site that is private property that we could possibly assess and utilize in designated safe spacing. So our elected officials are actually in favor and have already put us in contact to continue this conversation of designated spaces. The first pilot was with B&O Railroad that was successful in this past summer. And as well as that's why we're doing that, we're working on revising the current policy that is on paper right now that criminalizes dirt bikes from Baltimore City's local ordinance.
Awesome.
So all this.
Awesome.
Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer. And Mr. Chair, if you would allow, isn't it so that I, at least, and probably many other members of this committee would strongly support bond bills to push some state support over to both Baltimore City, Hagerstown, and any city that wanted to create some park infrastructure for this activity?
I think it is outside the purview of this delegate and this committee to be making decisions on bond bills after only hearing one bill.
No, touche.
Any further questions? Okay, it appears, let me just say something here. We've had traffic problem issues, not just in Baltimore and not just in Hagerstown, but also in Ocean City, Maryland. And for the most part, we've addressed those through enhanced enforcement. So I'm not prejudging what we're going to do here. That's, but I think we have to do something. We can't do nothing. Okay. And when you're the chairman, you can get the last word like that. So that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 77.
Thank you, everyone.
Proceed to what I believe is the last bill of the afternoon. Let me just double check. Yeah, House Bill 102, Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am glad to be before this committee today. Once again, I think batting cleanup. I am asking for your favorable consideration of House Bill 102, calling for increased penalties for car speeding contests, also referred to in some jurisdictions as car exhibitions. So you're about to see some footage of 4 different car contests, 3 of which were in the last few months, and the locations are in Southern Prince George's, downtown Silver Spring, Dundalk, and Essex. And I want to say,
Delegate Lehman, before you proceed, did you tell our chief of staff that you had videos?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. How long are these? What's the length of these videos?
There are 4 contests, and the footage is about 10 seconds each, Mr. Chairman. It fits within.
Go for it.
It's within my. I hope we can restart the clock.
I'll let you slide there. Go for it.
Thank you. So you're going to see footage from 4 car contests within the last few months: Southern Prince George's, downtown Silver Spring, Dundalk, and Essex. And I want to thank my intern, Charles Tuttle, who was able to find these videos on YouTube, and he actually created street maps to show you exactly where these events took place. So buckle up.
Okay.
We need music now.
Ooh, Fenton and Ellsworth. No, know exactly where that is. Okay.
Okay, so This was mainly to demonstrate that these contests or exhibitions are going on all over the state, and including in urban areas like the footage you saw in downtown Silver Spring, which was more of the sort of hot dog variety rather than high speed. But the bill was actually brought to the committee last year by Delegate Vaughn Stewart. It passed the Environment and Transportation Committee in the full House, but it was never voted on in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. The purpose is to decrease the number of illegal vehicle races or other car exhibitions that have occurred on public roadways and in parking lots by imposing stronger penalties, including fines and points, and by adding what we talked about in the last bill, a must appear provision. So the bill authorizes police departments and courts to impose.
Go ahead. Sorry,
impose,
that was my phone. My apologies.
Okay, it allows police departments and courts to impose penalties that are more appropriate to these contests, which are dangerous to participants, to onlookers, to other motorists when they happen on roadways. And of course, they are disruptive to the flow of traffic and to commerce. So the increased penalties are meant to act as deterrents for all drivers, including out-of-state drivers, many of whom participate in these contests, and to repeat offenders and to promote public safety. So quickly, the bill does three main things. It mandates a court appearance, and it increases the points assessed against a driver convicted of violating the law. So drivers would receive 8 points if there is no bodily injury during the event, 12 points if the event causes bodily injury. That is noteworthy because 8 points results in the suspension of a license, 12 points results in a license being revoked. I want to call to your attention the fact that this committee approved emergency legislation 2 or 3 years ago for just Worcester County because this problem had become so out of control down there. And what we did was we made these violations a must appear offense. And I talked to a police captain down there in Ocean City a few days ago who said by having a must appear requirement, they have actually reduced these incidents by 2/3. And the reason for that is obvious. It's inconvenient for folks to go to court. And in many instances, he confirmed, as well as other police officers in Prince George's and elsewhere, that a lot of the participants are actually from out of state. They are not just Marylanders, so it's even more inconvenient to have to return and go to court. The participants, so they have to appear, and that is an inconvenience. There's the increased fine from $500 to $1,000 if there is no bodily injury. The bill is drafted in a way that it keeps the $1,000 fine when there is bodily injury. I think that may need to be amended. And then it also allows officers the discretion of ordering vehicles to be impounded. Now that is already allowed under all counties.
Mary, I think you may have flowed over your 4 minutes, but I bet there are a lot of questions.
Sure, and so there's an allowance for discretionary impoundment, the increase in the fines and points, and I just want to end by saying these contests have clearly grown in frequency and size since the beginning of the pandemic, and I believe absent more serious penalties, they will continue to grow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, before I recognize other questions, I have 1 or 2 questions here, and that is that, so your bill does have a requirement to show up in court without having a year in jail, right?
Yes, absolutely it does. If I could point out that it is already in the statute, I did not add or change this. It already is in the statute that if one of these events results in bodily injury, there is the potential for imprisonment of up to a year, but that is already the law.
Okay. Okay, very good. Let's see, I had another question before my pea brain dropped it. I'll think of it later. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What happens if they fail to appear? So I know you're saying it's not incarcerable, it's just a must appear, but what is the mechanism that is employed should they fail to appear?
So from my, I had an interesting conversation with Judge Morrissey about this. And I do want to point out, Mr. Chairman, that in response to the must appear provision, I believe he said there are about half a dozen bills this session with must appear language. And for the first time, I think ever, the Legislative Review Committee of that organization is not taking a position against these must appear provisions. They are not doing that for the first time. And
I'm sorry, what committee is this that's not taking a position?
It's, I believe the name of it, and one of the attorneys on here can correct me, the Legislative Review Arm of the District Court System.
Okay, it's the court system. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
So they are not weighing in on must appear, and will deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, to answer your question, that is where there is a potential for jail time, and that is always the case where you have a must appear requirement. If someone does not appear because the violation says you must appear, then a judge can issue a warrant for the person's arrest. Or can give them a second chance and say, you need to appear. You already were supposed to get in here, or you could go to jail. That is the case under a whole bunch of laws, including traffic violation laws.
Okay, so it's basically you're leaving it up to the discretion of the judge to issue a bench warrant.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Okay, next question. Is there a next question? There don't appear to be any. Well, I have forgotten to recognize the other proponents. Let me go ahead and ask them to speak. First, John Seng with the Coalition for Highway Safety. John, you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, go for it. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'll stick to my 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman Barbe and members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee. Please support HB 102 and all its provisions in the interest of public safety on our public roads. I represent the interest of fellow Marylanders who drive on, bicycle on, or attempt to cross roads in our state. And more than anything else, these people would really like to live to see tomorrow. I'm not blowing things out of proportion here when I say that. The Maryland Coalition for Highway Safety that I founded includes people who have lost family members and friends to roadway violence committed by others, and they suffer with inconsolable pain of their losses every single day. And we really appreciate the bill sponsor Delegate Mary Lehman's extensive study and work on this legislation, which simply increases deterrence to the speeding or racing brand of road violence in Maryland. Whether due to messaging about defunding the police or the psychological impact of COVID and all the related anxieties there, we're seeing increasingly dangerous and reckless behavior on our roads, from Ocean City to Cumberland and St. Mary's to Westminster in the north. I've not seen these videos before. It's pretty shocking, like the Wild West throughout Maryland. And the fact that they're on YouTube or whatever sharing site just shows the sort of flip attitude that these perpetrators have. It's premeditated, deliberate, organized, violent criminal activity. No two ways about it. There's no good excuse for participating in illegal racing of any kind on any Maryland road, and the practice needs to stop. So what will it take? 2 simple questions for this committee. 1, do you agree it must stop? And 2, will you agree to raise the penalties to deter this kind of road violence? We would prefer that folks aren't not incarcerated. We would doubly prefer that they be deterred from this kind of behavior. And a particular point of emphasis is mandatory court appearances will be an effective deterrent, expectedly so much so that the burden on the justice system could actually decline. So the single goal must rise above all other concerns and inconveniences, safety first on our roads. Again, our coalition thanks Delegate Lehman for her work and advocacy for road safety. Mr. Chairman, finally, you and the members of this committee and the entire General Assembly and the governor holds it within your power to stem this avenue of road violence in Maryland. Please see the written testimony I've submitted and send a strong message that Maryland manages and insists upon safe roads, and submit a favorable response to HB 102. Thank you.
Okay, next witness is Ron Weiss. Ron?
Chair Barbe, Delegate Lehman, and members of the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to testify on a bill that's very important to me. I am a member of John's council, and I'm also the president of the Indian Head Highway Area Action Council. But I'm speaking for myself in support of HB 102. I live in Southern Maryland, and I'm a senior who would rather not meet his maker on Maryland roads. All my 6 grown children and their families live in Maryland, and I want them safe on our roads. My over 4 years of trying to make MD of Maryland 210 safer has led me to the conclusion that I, my family, and all Marylanders are at mortal risk in our roads because of the relatively few drivers who are potential killers. Transportation safety depends on users following the rules of the road to provide a predictable environment for all users. Racing and speed contests inject chaos in our road environment and make our driving environment less predictable and riskier. Air and railway modes of transportation do not tolerate bad actors, and we should not tolerate bad actors on our roads either. Over 500 people have lost their lives in Maryland roads in each of the last 2 years. If our roads were an airline, it would be grounded. Increasing the penalties incurred by drivers racing and speeding will go a long way to modifying their behavior for the benefit of all drivers and passengers. Thank you very much. I urge the committee to support HB 102.
Well, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Regina Ali. Regina, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I won't introduce myself again, but obviously I'm here on behalf of AAA in support of House Bill 102. Obviously, you have my written testimony, which actually shows quite a few horrific examples of where Marylanders have lost their lives on roadways, either as a result of an illegal speed race, and in many cases, it was not even the drivers of these illegal race cars, if you want to call them that. It was other motorists, it was pedestrian spectators. So I can tell you that according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, nationwide, approximately 49 people are injured, are killed. And let me look at nationally 49 people are injured for every 1,000, who participate in illegal racing every year. We believe that Delegate Lehman's bill and the enhanced penalties will go a long way to hopefully be a deterrent and help reduce this dangerous behavior on our roadways and parking lots and what have you. And we would obviously like for police to have additional discretion as it relates to the ability to impound a vehicle. So again, thanking Delegate Lehman for her leadership on this issue, and on behalf of AAA and our actually over 1 million members here in the state of Maryland, we would thank you for your consideration and urge a favorable report for House Bill 102. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Next, Karen Coakley. Karen? Am I on? Yeah, I'm on.
Okay, I've unmuted myself.
Okay.
Chairman Barbe, Vice Chairman Stein, and members of the Environmental Transportation Committee. My name is Karen Coakley, and I thank you immensely for allowing me to speak with you all today. I've submitted written testimony, but I'm going to go off script because we had a presentation last night with Delegate Lehman and Major Fisher, who's the major at my local police station. I live in Prince George's County in Beltsville. These races, the first one that came to my attention was when a group of racers closed the interstate of I-95 by College Park last spring, so that a charming driver who wanted to have funny games could do figure-8 wheelies. There was a resident from Beltsville who was trying to take a family member to the hospital. They were stuck in traffic. How would each of you feel if you were trying to get to a hospital? How would each of you feel if a fire truck, an ambulance, a police officer could not reach your emergency situation because these riders are hijacking, they are closing the roads? We saw videos last night where multiple, by the University of Maryland, down by National Harbor, these riders are closing major thoroughfares and, entertaining themselves. They have followers. At recent events in Prince George's County, there have been over 300 drivers from 5 different states blocking our roads, hampering first responders if they have to get somewhere. I don't want to see somebody lose their life because some moron is doing a figure eight and having fun and games. Please, please, please pass Mary Lehman's Bill 102. Thank you very much.
Okay,
And
thank
I
you.
didn't less than 2 minutes.
You know what? Treat yourself to a cookie. You've been good.
I know, but I'm very passionate. This has got to stop.
Okay. Jermaine Jordan.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the committee, the chairman, and Delegate Lehman for allowing me to speak. Throughout 2020 and 2021, law enforcement agencies have had a rise in complaints of street racing and exhibition driving. These departments have committed a large number of resources to combat these issues in an attempt to keep the public safe. One hindrance the law enforcement has had is the fact that the wording of the laws concerning street racing and exhibition driving is vague, and the penalties are nothing more than a slap on the wrist and do not deter these activities. These events are at times spontaneous and other times organized in advance and have caused disruptions in traffic and endangered the lives of citizens who traverse within our state. My testimony is in support of the proposed legislation with additions to serve as amendments to strengthen the laws. There should be an inclusion of Transportation Article 21-1132A2, exhibition driving, and Transportation Article 21-1117, skidding, spinning of wheels, and excessive noise prohibited in this penalty. Race and speed contests describe straight line movements on the roadways and are only part of the overall problem. There have been many examples of groups of vehicles stopping traffic to exhibit reckless behavior on roadways, as well as in parking areas used by the public. One of the most notable was the vehicle who stopped traffic to do donuts on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge in September of 2020. These actions are at times more dangerous than straight line races due to the erratic nature that the vehicles have as they rotate, around a central point. Adding a minimum amount of time that vehicles may be impounded, as well as the penalty of prolonged impoundment of the vehicles used in violation, is if there's a conviction of subsequent violations of the same statute, will serve as a more substantial deterrent of committing these violations. I believe that I understand the goal of HB 102, so I think with these minor amendments, the bill will reach the intended goal of preventing the reckless actions and keeping the public safe as they move across our great state. I encourage this committee to vote in favor of HB 102. I give this testimony as a citizen of Prince George's County in the state of Maryland, hoping that all travel safely. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think that's everybody who wanted to testify. Do we have any questions? Okay, if we don't have any questions, let me just say something here. I'm sensing an opportunity, Delegate Frazier Hidalgo and the Transportation Committee, to write some sort of legislation that is uniform to all of these problems. And it appears to me that, we of course had the senseless behavior in Ocean City that we addressed maybe 1 or 2 years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. And now we've got problems in Hagerstown. We've got problems in Silver Spring, Mary, 3 blocks away from where I grew up. We have problems throughout the state of Maryland. And so I guess, Dave, I think what I want to say to you, and I want to say this in public because I think it's important for everybody to hear at least how I think we should be going here. Since the courts appear to have understood that making people show up in court is something that they're just going to have to learn to live with, I think that's something I think we might have to consider going there. We can't do nothing. But whatever we do for any of these bills, I think has to be the same thing because they're, just as we have this very uniform treatment with respect to photo radar, where we have those 4 rules that we apply, I think we have to start to look at these problems in the same fashion because not only are there these road racing problems, but there's also, I'm getting a lot of emails, I bet you guys are as well, of people who are I just got an email today about somebody complaining about people driving around making a lot of noise. And this is something that's getting worse and worse and worse. And, I've been in the legislature for 30 years and I don't ever remember getting so many complaints about this kind of behavior except for the last couple of years. So, you know what? Go figure it out, Dave, and your subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, we will. It's also happened in Germantown.
Yeah, it's
It's been
happening
happening in
everywhere.
Germantown as well, right?
Yeah, this
We work-
misbehavior is happening all over the place. And you know, I understand that some people, you know what, I'm just going to leave it there. I have a lot of faith in you and your folks to figure out a uniform solution that applies to all 24 jurisdictions. So
we'll work on it. We'll work on it.
okay,
Thank you.
there we have it. Any announcements
I
from
have an
subcommittee
announcement.
chairs?
Yeah, I have an announcement.
Yes, Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to have a subcommittee meeting with the local government subcommittee, but we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to send, it was only for organizational purposes. I'm going to send out a detailed memo to the members about procedures that we're going to follow. And we will be meeting on an as-needed basis in this particular subcommittee. Thank you.
And before you go there, I haven't seen the annual letter yet where we send, where you and I sign the letter about local procedure and remind them that this has been the procedure for the last 8,000 years in Maryland. So I look forward to seeing that letter and signing
Yeah,
it.
I actually gave Trish
we
my
s-
signature to put on that.
Okay.
I'll
Okay,
send you a
good.
copy, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good. Maybe I can use that signature to go buy myself a vacation or something. Dave, what say you?
We will not have the motor vehicle subcommittee today. We don't have quite enough bills that we just heard. So in an effort for our members to digest what we heard, but we will be having meetings next week, and we're going to really stay on top of everything so we don't fall behind.
Okay, any other?
Prepared for meetings next week.
Oh, yeah. Any other subcommittee chairs before I recognize Delegate Lehman?
Chairman Barber.
Yes, who is it?
Brooke.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi. So we have not done an organizational meeting for land use and ethics because we're so organized already.
And ethical
but
too.
we will not have a meeting next week, but after that we will, and I'll be emailing all of you to talk about potentially doing meetings in the mornings, sometimes before session, because we often run into this issue where we are competing with natural resources and ag and everybody else who has evenings and afternoons. So we're going to try to find a time that we don't have to move it every week and don't have to keep people really late. So we'll be in touch. Thanks.
Okay, and we are going to have our first leadership meeting of all the subcommittee chairs and Jay Jacobs next week sometime. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could just ask Delegate Frazier Hidalgo, I've been working on this issue. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I've been working on this issue since last summer when Delegate Stewart handed the bill off to me. I'm not on the motor vehicle subcommittee. I'd just like to be able to work with him and share, some of the insights I've gotten from talking to a lot of citizens and law enforcement over the last 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll find Dave a very easy guy to work with.
We'll work on it. And I will say a couple of years ago when we worked on the Ocean City problem, we ended up working very closely with judiciary and getting some recommendations and clearing some things through them. So that will probably happen again, some form of it, but we'll work on it. And we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments for the good of the order? If not, have a great weekend. Behave yourselves, people.